Romanian Eagle. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 351, Returning to the Hometown, Part 2. ? After the conversation, Errol's invited the mayor over alone. Looking at the somewhat unknown mayor, Errol said with a smile, "Mayor Abel, I have read your information. According to your ability, I feel a little puzzled that you haven't been promoted in the past 10 years. Can you explain it conveniently?" Facing Errol's inquiry, Mayor Abel said with an angry expression, "Because I offended a member of the Isaac family before, I have stayed in this position." Errol's also knew about the Isaacs, a well-known Hungarian military family in Transylvania. The family, because of its strong ties to the Austro-Hungarian army, had already fled to mainland Hungary when Romania occupied the region. It's really unfair to you, but now, you don't have to worry about the family's obstruction anymore. Errol's words did not make Mayor Abel fluctuate in the slightest. Seeing this, Errol's decided to take some benefits. I saw him sigh and say, "There are currently some positions in Dua that there are no suitable candidates. It is necessary to have officials who are familiar with local conditions and capable officials. This is too frustrating." In the face of Errol's naked words, Mayor Abel finally moved, only to see him hurriedly asked, "I don't know why those positions are so demanding. The tax chief, the construction chief, and the police chief." Facing the three positions mentioned by Errol's, Mayor Abel jumped several times in his heart. These are all very oily positions. It seems that the new government is putting carrots on the lips of their former Austro-Hungarian officials. As one of them, Abel is of course also moved. Don't you know what are the requirements for these positions? In the face of Mayor Abel's question, Errol's replied, "It's mainly about capacity, especially in terms of government affairs and taxation." Errol's words made Abel immediately see Romania's intentions, which was to let them use their own family. In terms of taxation, the current situation can only be done from the rich, and now the wealthy and rich in Transylvania, Hungarians occupy the absolute majority. In terms of government affairs, Abel believes that the rumors spread in the town are not only in the town, but must be in other places. And most of the wealth obtained by the wealthy Hungarians is more or less in the form of squeezing the Romanian people, so there will be a wave of calls for the illegal deeds of these wealthy people. In the past, the government could ignore it, but now if it does not, it will definitely be stripped of its posts and driven home. This not only satisfies the wishes of the local Romanian people, but also scavenges these local Hungarian wealthy people, and also cleans up uncooperative officials. The benefits are not too much. And the Hungarians who can meet the above two needs in the town of Brat. Mayor Abel immediately thought of Ilzabi, who was still there. This Hungarian nobleman with a lot of grievances is simply a character specially prepared for his promotion. As for the deeds of being embarrassed with his brothers and sisters before, Abel has forgotten them. And he still remembered that Ilzabi was quite perfunctory towards himself, relying on his family's relationship. That's right, it seems that he needs to seek justice for the people in the town who have been oppressed by him. Mayor Abel, who had already thought about everything in his heart, immediately expressed his determination righteously. "Please rest assured, Your Excellency, I will definitely let the government see my ability and will not let it down." In the words of Mayor Abel, Errol's nodded to show his support and said, "Go, let the people of the town know about your abilities." So the mayor left the room with the thought of making Ilzabi his report card. At this time, Miss came out of another room. As soon as he came out, he took Errol's hand and said with some moving, "Thank you, I appreciate your help this time." Mizik's gesture of gratitude, Errol said with a smile. "Don't be so polite, the main thing this time is that the government has this idea, and I just gave the mayor of Abel a little hint. And according to the situation, this Ilzabi is very difficult to avoid the next cleanup. This tip is very helpful to me. If Ilzabi runs away, I don't know when my revenge will be avenged." Errol's, probably realizing he shouldn't be talking about what's next for the government, talks about Mizik. "You are my brother's subordinate. He often says that you are the most capable company commander in his regiment, and this time you have made enough credit to be promoted to the battalion commander position. a battalion commander in his early 30s. Maybe I will return it in the future. When I need your help. Facing Errol's words, Misk waved his hands repeatedly. This is all due to the leadership of the regiment commander and battalion commander. I'm just a person who executes orders wherever you are. You can't belittle yourself. A major who was born as a civilian in his 30s. This is quite outstanding, and at least he will be a general in the future. One is grateful, the other is thinking of making new contacts, and both of them speak very well. And when Errol heard that Misk was not married yet, he even said something to introduce his cousin to him. This made Misk, who did not change his color on the battlefield, almost made a big mess. That's right, this Errol is the cousin of the head of the Misk. This time, he happened to be a government official, and was arranged to be the leader of the inspection team in several counties such as Dua. As a young hero who was highly praised by his cousin, Lieutenant Colonel Delson, Misk was seen by Errol, who knew the local situation privately. Of course Errol, who knew the whole matter of grievances, would not miss this opportunity to make friends, so the two hit it off. So Alzabi, who was the target, was tragic, and it could even be said that his end was doomed. The day after the rumors came out, someone sued Alzabi. At this time, the mayor of Edel, who had an unselfish image on his face, personally took someone to the manor to arrest Alzabi. At the same time, so that people can release the news that Alzabi has offended a big man in Romania. So in the next few days, a large number of town residents whose interests were violated by Alzabi ran to report their crimes. And the staff handling the case recorded evidence of his crime, reaching dozens of kilograms of written material. Among them, the longest time span of criminal evidence was 30 years ago, which made the staff sent from Romania stupefied. Faced with this situation, officials sent from Romania to take over the duties of the Diva government tried the case publicly, and the crowds who came to watch the Dua courthouse were filled with water. After 3 days of trial, Alzabi was sentenced to death and deprived of political rights for life on charges of murder, embezzlement of other people's property, and robbery of people. After this trial, the local Romanian people were greatly encouraged, and many local Hungarian wealthy people fled to Hungary with their property, even if they could only get 1/10 of their wealth. As a result, the economic power of Transylvania was transferred to the Romanians in large numbers. Under such circumstances, it should be pointed out here that this transfer of property is limited to Hungarians. As for the minority of Germans and Serbs, their interests have not been violated, except for a very small number of people who are extremely angry. Their interests have been guaranteed. The reason for this is also in line with the Romanian government's diplomatic strategy, in which the Hungarian government's oppression of ethnic minorities is also inseparable. According to the secret order of the Bucharest government, the local Hungarians were mainly forced to leave in order to change the demographic structure of Transylvania. As the second largest ethnic group in Transylvania, the Hungarians account for 32% of the population, which is too much for future rule. Taking advantage of the current war, it is also the righteousness to drive him away as much as possible. And Major Misk, who caused all this, returned to the army the day after Alzabi was captured. I have a great revenge, so my future becomes more important. Maybe I can meet my niece in Arles when I have time. I'm not too young, and it is time to think about lifelong events. The changes in Transylvania did not catch Edel's attention, because a more important matter now requires his attention. He summoned the 2 chief officers of the intelligence department to discuss it in person. Dear, click in and give a good comment. The higher the score, the faster the update. It is said that those who give full marks to the new ones have found a beautiful wife at the end. The mobile station is newly revised and upgraded. The address, data and bookmarks are synchronized with the computer station. No advertisements. Fresh reading. Chapter 352. Russia. 039's current situation. ? Inside the Romanian royal palace, Edel is listening to 2 intelligence chiefs about Russia. According to our investigation, Russia has now been divided into several forces at war. Edel listened to the report of the captain of the bodyguard, Karist, and learned that there is now a pot of turmoil in Russia. In October last year, after the Soviet government and the Allied bloc led by Germany signed the Brest Agreement, Russia became turbulent. Among them, Kornilov, who had served as the highest commander of Russia with the most irascible character, took the lead in breaking out the rebellion in Rostov on the lower reaches of the Don River. However, since Kornilov had only a few thousand troops and had little influence, the Soviet government did not pay attention to the rebellion. Another reason is that the Soviet Russian government had no military power in the lower Don River at that time. And if you send troops from Moscow, you need to destroy a large number of local governments that have not recognized the Soviet Russian regime along the way. Its too much movement is not conducive to the upcoming parliamentary elections, so its actions are temporarily let go. In the January Constituent Assembly elections, the Bolshevik Party won fewer votes than the Social Revolutionary Party because of the signing of a contract with Germany. So Lenin and others overthrew the election organized by themselves and sent troops to disperse the Constituent Assembly by force, resulting in the January 5th bloodshed. The Russian rebellion spread immediately. On January 20th, Yudenich, commander-in-chief of the Caucasus Front, launched a rebellion in Petrozavodsk. It was aided by the Allied powers gathered in Murmansk, and a large amount of weapons and ammunition was supplied to Yudenich's rebels. And Yudenich, who was supported by a large number of weapons and equipment, immediately prepared his army and went south to attack St. Petersburg and start a war with the Soviet and Russian troops. As for Kolchak, who Edel is most concerned about, the captain of the guards also revealed his specific movements in early February. In the city of Ufa on the west side of the Ural Mountains, many political parties dissatisfied with Soviet Russia gathered here and established a cabinet to govern, that is, the Russian Provisional Government. Kolchak, who stayed in the United States for nearly 2 months, served as the military minister in the government in charge of military affairs. Among them, he was responsible for negotiating with the famous Czech Legion for the first time. As in history, the Czechoslovak Legion, composed of 60,000 Austro-Hungarian prisoners of war, revolted on the way back through Siberia. As in history, they also caused dissatisfaction and rebellion because of being discriminated against. The difference is that the location is no longer Chelyabinsk, but in cities such as Novosibirsk. And this time, the Russian Provisional Government, which was set up to compete with the Soviet Union and Russia, did not have too much wrangling. The reason is that the power of the Soviet Union and Russia in this civil war is weaker than in history. These parties are eager to fight back to Moscow, St. Petersburg, etc., and the elite areas of Russia have gained enough influence to gain the upper hand in the next election. Compared with the vigorous rebellion, the military strength of the Soviet Russian government was too weak this time. In order to fulfill the soldiers' promise to stop the war, Soviet Russia could only disband a large number of soldiers who had long since returned to their hearts. So when the rebellion broke out frequently, the reliable army in the hands of Soviet Russia was less than 150,000, nearly 50,000 less than in the history of the same period, 194,000 troops in April 1918. In addition to fulfilling the promise, the main reason is the lack of sufficient materials. Because of the existence of Edel, a small butterfly, a large amount of materials in Russia were resold to Romania, and Edel spent a lot of money to buy these materials from Romania, so the extortion on the Brest contract was even more fierce. After the Soviet Russia, which was already short of supplies, was severely hung with a layer of oil and water by the Austria, basically the warehouse was running away from mice. Therefore, the number of troops maintained in the army is even less. However, in the face of the rebellions that broke out across the country, Soviet Russia quickly showed its combat effectiveness. In early January, the People's Committee of Soviet Russia issued a decree on the formation of the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army and the Workers' and Peasants' Red Navy. On January 21st, the day after Yudenich's rebellion, the Soviet Union established the Supreme Military Council to give unified command of its troops. On February 9th, a local military organization was established to implement a universal military training system throughout the country. On February 29th, the All-Russian Central Executive Committee passed a decree on the introduction of universal military service. The Soviet Russian government also decided to mobilize the manpower and material resources of the whole country to turn all the work into the wartime track. So the civil war between the two Russian governments broke out. Edel asked, after listening to the intelligence department's report on the recent situation of the Soviet Russian civil war, then do we still have merchants operating in Russia? Facing the king's question, Muluk, who knew the situation best, replied, Your Majesty, we still have quite a few merchants operating in Russia. Milek's answer caught Edel's interest. Tell me the story. Then Milek explained the current situation of these businessmen in detail. These Romanian businessmen are quite prosperous in Russia. They are not only around the Black Sea, but also have their footsteps in the Ural Mountains, and can even be seen in Central Asia. This is all due to the current chaotic situation in Russia, which has cut off the connection with the central government in many places. Some are active and some are passive. But no matter whether they are active or passive, their official class is basically that of Tsarist Russia. So these businessmen specially prepared good things for these officials. Dollars, pounds, the whole family emigrated abroad. As long as these officials put forward personal requirements, they can all meet. As a result, a larger smuggling activity than during the Russian Revolution revolved around this. During this period, materials worth nearly $1 million were loaded on ships and shipped to Romania through various means of transportation. Most of these supplies were sold to these Romanian merchants at very low prices by greedy officials. Among them, the quantity of production and living materials such as minerals, grains, and cotton is the largest. On the one hand, there is a shortage of living materials in Russia, and on the other hand, a large number of materials that can be relieved have been resolved. This year and next year, the living conditions of the Russian people will be more difficult than in history, and all this is what Edel hopes to see. Making the Russian civil war more brutal could help Romania relieve a lot of stress in the future. After all, Russia is too much of a threat to Romania, especially when it is still red. How's the preparation for the things I asked you to prepare all the time? After learning about the current situation of businessmen in Russia, Edel plans to work hard on the next windfall. Facing Edel's question, Milek replied, "We are always preparing, and we can act immediately when the time is right." As the Tsar secretly moved the gold to the Bank of Kazan, the Romanian intelligence officers who had been watching here immediately sent the news back to the country, and Milek, who received this information, suddenly realized the plan that the king had made himself and Kalas do all the time. This gold seems like a suitable target to smuggle nearly 600 tons of goods from Kazan. As for why the king let himself prepare years in advance, Milek did not make random guesses. Maybe the person who gave the Tsar this advice may have done it on purpose. In this regard, he kept this idea deep in his heart and never dared to reveal anything. Edel, who didn't know what Milek was thinking, said immediately after hearing his answer, ready to find an opportunity to smuggle the gold back immediately. It's best between the Soviet and Belarusian armies. Clear. PS. Recommend a book, Marvel's Lost Conscience. You can see how shrinking it is by looking at the name, and you can look forward to a new book by an old author. Dear, click in and give a good comment. The higher the score, the faster the update. It is said that those who give full marks to the new ones have found a beautiful wife at the end. The mobile station is newly revised and upgraded. The address, data and bookmarks are synchronized with the computer station. No advertisements. Fresh reading. Chapter 353 Kazan Gold. 1. Question mark? The land in April is already full of the breath of spring, but in Kazan, a city on the Volga River, the breath of spring is not strong, and sometimes people can feel a bit of winter reluctance at night. In this city, captured by the first Tsar Ivan IV, there are traces of the intersection of various ethnic groups. One of the most distinctive features is the city's religious sites. Churches, mosques, and Lama temples echo each other, making the city unique. Kazan has always been Russia's transportation hub. Shipping and railways have brought a lot of goods to the city, and prosperous trade has also brought popularity and profits. In particular, the railway through Siberia made Kazan more prosperous, and at the same time, made his importance more reflected. So the Soviet Union arranged for a division to defend the city. However, after the establishment of the provisional government in Ufa, the Soviet Russian government resolutely sent 3 more divisions in the case of its own shortage of troops. Moreover, many people in the city were also drafted into the army according to the mobilization law, so the pedestrians in Kazan were also much rarer. Fredericia is currently walking slowly through the city. Dark skin, Khan Wu's strong arms, a rough face, and coarse clothes with oil stains on his body. Even if his friend stood in front of him, he would not believe that he was dressed like a toiled public, and he knew Fredericia, who had a graceful demeanor indeed. Sometimes even Fredericia almost forgets whether he has been trained in noble etiquette. Now his demeanor and conversation make one believe that he is a worker. Even a skilled dock worker forgot to mention that Fredericia doesn't have that name now. He has a new name called Ivan Virisi. If you shout Ivan in the street in Russia, at least several people will agree. This, like Hans in Germany, is a fairly popular name. Fredericia still met several acquaintances along the way, and he talked as much as usual for a few minutes, until he passed by a church. He saw someone draw a pentagram in a funny way outside the church wall, and the residents of this church were cursing and planning to greet the troublemaker. Facing this situation, Frederick continued to walk forward without raising his eyes. It's just that in the past, he always walked to the intersection and turned left. I don't know why he suddenly turned right today. Then Fredericia moved erratically, sometimes through the alleys, sometimes on the avenues. He went straight in when he came to a tailor's shop called Cockerill. Hello, is there anything I can do for you? The owner is a middle-aged man. After seeing Fredericia walk in, he asked with a smile on his face. Facing the store's inquiries, Fredericia said, I want to make a dress for my wife. Any requests? My wife likes sky blue skirts with white dots and 3 bells tied around the waist. Facing Frederick's request, the owner said helplessly, sorry, we don't have the color you mentioned in our store. Can you change it? Then change it to sky blue with black spots. Sorry, still not. Change to white with black dots. Still none. Black with white spots. Nor then get a pink shirt. I have a black shirt with white dots here. After a series of conversations like finding fault, Fredericia and the owner turned serious at this time. The owner reached out his hand and said, hello, I'm Nightingale. Fredericia also reached out and answered, hello, I'm Dove. After the two of them connected, Ying, the owner of the shop, took out a closing sign and hung it at the door. Then he spoke to Frederici plz follow me. After speaking, Nightingale took Frederick to the interior of the store. When he walked into Fredericia, he realized that it was a 2-story building, and Nightingale led him to the corridor, but he did not intend to go up to the 2nd floor. Instead he bent down and walked down the corridor. After pushing a shielded board away, a small hidden door was revealed. Nightingale, the shopkeeper, turned around and said to Fredericia, Dove, let's go here. Fredericia nodded no problem. After the two stooped through the small door, Fredericia found himself in a small alley where the exit was blocked, and Nightingale led her along the alley into it. Boom, boom, boom. At the end of the alley, he knocked on the only door here. At this time, someone asked from behind the door, who? Faced with the question, Nightingale answered in a low voice, it's me. Crunch. The door was opened, and a capable young man in his 20s glanced at Fredericia with a wary look. At this time, the owner, Nightingale, spoke. He's a Dove. Facing Nightingale's explanation, the young man replied with a normal expression, come in, the adults are already waiting inside. From the beginning to the end, the young man who opened the door did not have close contact with the two of them. Through his left hand, which was always in his pocket, Federici had a rough answer in his heart. It is estimated that he was born in the action team, so he is so vigilant about his own people. The two walked in through the hallway at the door, and this time they followed the stairs to the 2nd floor, and there was a young man here too. After Nightingale stepped forward to negotiate with him, the young man walked up to Fredericia and said follow me. Facing the young man's actions, Fredericia didn't speak and nodded to indicate that he understood. But in his heart, he is full of curiosity about this meeting. He doesn't know who is so big this time. It is a luxurious configuration to have at least 4 people's intelligence base. As a qualified intelligence officer, Federici also knew the importance of intelligence strongholds. However, inversely proportional to its importance, there are only 1 or 2 people in general intelligence bases. Because setting up an intelligence base requires a lot of expenses, and more importantly, it has very high requirements for personnel, especially loyalty point, because an intelligence base will grasp the status of several intelligence personnel. If the loyalty is not high, the entire network under his control will be destroyed after being arrested, so loyalty is the biggest test. In addition, it is also the most dangerous among intelligence personnel, so it is also the reason why the establishment of bases is relatively small. Frederick's wild thoughts didn't last long, as the young man on the 2nd floor only took him a few steps. When he came to the door of a room, He knocked on the door. An inquiring voice rang from behind the door. "What's up? The dove is here. Let him in. Dear. Click in and give a good comment. The higher the score, the faster the update. It is said that those who give full marks to the new ones have found a beautiful wife at the end. The mobile station is newly revised and upgraded. The address, data and bookmarks are synchronized with the computer station. No advertisements. Fresh reading. Chapter 354 Kazan Gold 2. Question mark? The young man who led the way pushed open the door to signal to him, and at this time Fredericia was inexplicably nervous, but now he can only go in first. As a result, only after walking into the room did Fredericia realize that the person he needed to meet this time knew him. It was still the familiar face, but it was much older than before, and still had a fat body. Sitting in front of him is Christo, the chief officer of Fredericia's training, but according to the news from a few years ago, isn't his training director already the deputy chief? Could it be that this mission is so important that a deputy director is needed to perform it? Fredericia's confusion didn't strike Christo. I saw him say with a smile. "Hello Fredericia, long time no see." Facing Christo's greeting, Frederick woke up. This is not the time for him to speculate. "Hello, Mr. Crystal. It's been years since we last saw each other. I didn't expect you to remember me." At this time Christo replied. As an intelligence officer, it's not too difficult to remember what people looked like a few years ago. You left a deep impression on me at that time. After the two finished talking about their past, Christo, who was the operation commander this time, spoke about Fredericia's mission. "This time to wake you up. The task is to prepare a ship to transport the goods." When Frederick heard this, he subconsciously replied, "It's simple." As the most skilled worker in the dock, Fredericia has the confidence to find a ship to deliver goods in the shipyard. Fredericia's words did not stop Christo, but instead asked, "Is it simple?" Christo's words pressured Frederici. There are indeed many ships in the shipyard that need to be repaired and maintained, but there are very few ships that can carry 600 or 700 tons of cargo. Is Kazan a seaport? There are all kinds of ships. As a port on the Volga River, the largest ship in Kazan transports 800 tons of goods. The ships that can transport 600 to 700 tons of goods are all in his mind. Fredericia thought about whether these ships need to come to the shipyard for maintenance while preparing himself a way out. This takes time to prepare. "Can I use 2 boats?" Facing Frederick's question, Christo answered directly. "It's no problem, as long as it can be transported." Christo's words made Fredericia relieved. Now the 300 or 400 ton ship is much easier to handle, and it is convenient for him to start. After Christo arranged this task, "Go on. There is another task that needs your help." Facing Christo's words this time, Federis asked normally this time. "What mission?" "I will arrange for people to go to the shipyard before we move, and you need to settle them." "How many people?" Facing Frederick's question, Christo said with a smile. "There are not more than a dozen people. They are there to ensure the safety of our means of transportation." Fredericia thought about the abandoned factory buildings in the shipyard and replied, "No problem." Seeing Fredericia's willingness to agree, Christo took out a bottle of vodka and poured 2 glasses, handed Fredericia a glass and said, "Then wish us a successful completion of our mission." Vodka is hard to see these days, and Fredericia has not been drinking for a long time, so he rudely took the glass and drank it and replied, "I wish the kingdom victory in this war. I wish the kingdom." After the two put down the wine glasses, Christo spoke, "One more thing. Can you find a way to find vehicles and other transportation from the shipyard?" Fredericia asked when he heard Christo's words. "Is it for the purpose of bringing the cargo onto the ship?" "Yes, according to our plan. There is not a lot of time, so more transportation must be used." Fredericia knew the situation at the shipyard well, and answered after thinking about it, "This problem is not too difficult. I will find a way to solve it." Then I wish you success in advance. After Frederick and Christo discussed the mission, they turned around and left. He still went out from the tailor shop, but he had an extra piece of clothes when he went out. After all, the reason for coming to the tailor shop to buy clothes was enough. On Christo's side, the preparations began after Frederick left. As the largest foreign operation in Romania since its establishment, Christo has a myriad of things that he needs to deal with, and Frederick's side is only one of the retreat routes for this operation. In fact, this operation involves personnel, even if it is not comparable to that in China. The number of lurking personnel in the early stage alone reached nearly 100, and when preparing for the operation, the opening of various strongholds on the route, and the most important thing is to seize the gold of Kazan. The required armed and transport personnel will be a large plan of nearly 1,000 people. Although there are other people who share their concerns, the most important thing in Kazan is that Christo needs to make up his own mind, so he is very busy with things right now. Just then there was another knock on the door. Christo stopped the pen in his hand and responded, "Come in, Mr. Yi, who is here?" Christo immediately answered the follower's words. "Let him in." After Christo's voice fell, a middle-aged man wearing a long-brimmed hat and a tattered coat walked in. Christo asked directly without waiting for him to speak, "Silka, what's going on?" Shirka, who was called Wild Fox, took off his hat and said while taking off his coat, "I found that Mr. Donovsky, but he's asking a little too much." Shilka didn't answer right away. His eyes lit up when he saw the vodka on the table. He took the bottle unceremoniously, poured himself a drink, drank it all, and said after some aftertaste, "He wants 5 tons of cargo." When Christo heard Shirka's words, he immediately frowned. Does he know how much 5 tons of gold is worth? It's just a location in a secret room. Why doesn't he dare to ask for such a price? It's no wonder that Christo was unhappy. The location of a secret vault, dared to ask for 5 tons of gold. Isn't this crazy? It's just the current situation that makes them have to know the location of the secret vault. It's all to blame for the poor preparation before. In fact, it can't be completely blamed on them. The Romanian intelligence department had arranged for personnel to lurch in the Bank of Kazan before, but because the lurking time was short and the level was not high, they only knew the situation of the vault, but had no idea about the secret vault. At present, in the face of the approaching Belarusian army, dozens of tons of gold on the bright side of the vault have already been transported away. The Romanian intelligence agency knew very well that the Russian government had shipped more than this amount, so it was obvious that some of the gold had not been found by the Soviet Union. After all, in a situation where Kazan has become less safe, is it not a move to fund the enemy to still leave a large amount of gold? So this is the focus of the Romanian intelligence services, and this Mr. Donovsky is also the only person who knows the location of the secret vault and is still in Kazan. At least the only one Romanian intelligence knows about. But even the only person in the know, asking 5 tons of gold is too much. Facing the fried Christo, Shirka was not afraid at all. He continued to drink the wine in his hand and said, "Isn't that robbing us?" Hearing this, Christo said in a dark voice, "Isn't he afraid of dying to spend this money?" Facing Christo's words, Shilka took another drink. This move is a bit suspicious, because Christo has signs of angering him. However, Shilka seems to have done this in front of Christo a lot, and he skillfully shifted the direction of the person in front of him with a single sentence. Others have already figured out a way out. Say, Shirka took a note from his pocket and said, "He asked us to send this to a man named Morial in California, USA, and to receive a reply within 2 days. Before he could cooperate with us." Christo took the sticky note from him and opened it. It was full of jumbled letters. Through its thrashing traces, Christo judged from his years of experience that this was a cipher telegram that was only recently written, and Shirka's words confirmed his guess. It was written by that Donovsky who went back to his room after talking to me and handed it to me with stilling points. So this is most likely a telegram about leaving us behind. Both of them have been engaged in intelligence work for many years, and the premise of Donovsky's cooperation is a reply to this telegram, so it is likely to be the case. And this Mr. Donovsky was smart enough to give them 2 days. Then after deducting the time the telegram was on the road, there was not much time left for them to decipher it. Shilka looked at Christo, who was thinking, and asked curiously, "What shall we do now?" Christo thought about various ways in his head and finally gave up, so he could only say with a sigh, "What else can I do? I can only send a telegram to the country. I hope that the boss will not say that we are not doing well." I knew you would say that. In the face of Shirka's words, Christo looked back and saw that most of the vodka was empty, and he couldn't bear the ignorance in his heart. "Shilka, you don't seem to be reconciled if you don't drink up my wine." In the face of Christo's anger, Shilka said it carelessly, Stingy point. Then he poured another glass an hour and a half later. The conundrum that troubled Christo and Shirka was placed in Milik's office. Also attached is the importance of Donovsky to the operation team. Of course, the two veterans of intelligence work know what to say. Faced with this somewhat greedy request, Milik also smiled bitterly. The reward of 5 tons of gold was the largest amount he had ever handled. So he can only pick up this telegram and find someone who can make a decision, and this person can only be our beloved His Majesty the King. Of course, he will give this telegram to the technical department to decipher, but he does not have much hope. This is not because it is too complicated, but because there is not enough time. In the absence of other reference objects, according to his years of experience, this password will take at least 5 days. And they are deducting the time for transmission, which is only half a day at most, which is too little for them. Dear, click in and give a good comment. The higher the score, the faster the update. It is said that those who give full marks to the new ones have found a beautiful wife at the end. The mobile station is newly revised and upgraded. The address, data and bookmarks are synchronized with the computer station. No advertisements. Fresh reading. Chapter 355 9th Kazan Gold. 3. This request is really bold. In the palace, Edel looked at the telegram sent by Milik and was a little surprised by the conditions of this Donovsky. This is not because Edel has never seen so much money, but as an individual, daring to put such conditions on them shows that he must have enough confidence in himself. And 5 tons of gold is also stuck at a key point. If there is more, he will put himself in danger. If it is less, he will not be reconciled. Taking away 1% of the wealth is enough for him to live in heaven. He is really a greedy and wise man. But why are you unhappy with this condition? Is there no other way? Facing Edel's question, Milik immediately said that he would consider it. It's not that there isn't, it just needs to take into account safety, and we think it's best to promise. Thinking of the role of this batch of gold in Romania, Edel nodded. Then do as you wish. Yes, your majesty. Milik knew what the king meant, and this time it was considered an action led by their intelligence bureau, and the king asked the Royal Intelligence Bureau of the Chief of Guards to do it for him, and he also met various requirements, so he must come up with the results. The result can only be that the gold is safely transported back to China, otherwise they will have to bear the consequences. So Milik, who knows the consequences, has no other concerns now, and everything is the most important thing to ensure that the gold returns home. After returning to his office from the palace, he had someone send a telegram to the United States according to Donovsky's request. The call back from the United States came the next day, and Milik said to the staff without even looking at it, send it to Kazan. Yes, chief. Just the next morning, Christo in Kazan received a call back from the United States forwarded by Bucharest. Also arriving with them was asking them to be ready to take the gold. Looking at the domestic callback, Christo will forward the telegram from the United States and hand it to Shilka, who has been waiting here for news. Send it to that Donovsky, he'll be satisfied now. Shilka, who received the telegram, flicked the telegram with his hand and said, 5 tons of gold. I've never seen it in my life. This Mr. Donovsky got it easily. He should be satisfied. Shirka immediately took this telegram and walked out. It is estimated that Mr. Donovsky should also be unable to wait. It turned out that when Shirka handed the telegram to Donovsky, he left Shirka in the living room while he returned to the room. When he appeared again, Shilka, who saw his smiling peers who were a little bored, said, I made you wait for a long time. Now I wish us a happy cooperation. And Shirka replied to him, yeah, I hope we have a good cooperation. After getting Donovsky, Christo went back to his busy work. After 3 days, he finally waited for the last group of people to arrive. The Volga River in the middle of the night. The night wind is still a little cool, and Christo, with his own hands, waited by the river 3 kilometers away from the city of Kazan. They also brought dozens of trucks as means of transportation here. The fact that they were able to get these trucks in what is now Kazan is the result of the Romanian intelligence services working in Kazan for many years. Just as Christo was waiting anxiously with his crew, the sound of a rumbling steamboat came from far to near. I'm coming. There was a commotion among those who were waiting. Signal and let them dock here. Christo, who was the leader, gave orders to his subordinates. After Christo gave the order, The two subordinates with gas lamps immediately waved their gas lamps clockwise by the river. Obviously their movements caught the ship's attention, and the sound was getting louder and louder. When the ship was about to dock, everyone saw that it was a passenger and cargo mixed ship of nearly 200 tons. After the boat stopped, a group of Khan Wulian with indifferent expressions and Eleonora walked down one after another. Each of them carried a long canvas bag that seemed to contain weapons, and at this time Christo greeted him. At this time, a leader in his 40s also emerged from this group of people. Through his cold eyes and sturdy breath, he looked like a man who had experienced various battles for a long time. This is Christo walking up to him. Lieutenant Colonel, where is he? Welcome you here. This turned out to be Vasily, who had raided the Austro-Hungarian border with Miluk, and is now Lieutenant Colonel. However, in front of Christo, the deputy director of the intelligence bureau, Vasily didn't dare to pose at all, and immediately answered with a military salute. Vasily led a team of 150 people, and all arrived. Looking at the serious Vasily, Christo said again and again, "Let's put it down. This is an enemy environment and we are not an army, so there's no need to be so formal." At this time, the staff that Christo brought to respond immediately stepped forward and handed black tea and hot coffee to the people who had just arrived. Let these tired travelers relieve their tired feeling. At this time, Christo also handed a cup of hot coffee to Captain Vasily and asked with concern, "How was the road?" Vasily, who smelled the aroma of hot coffee, replied, "Not bad. In fact, it's more than good. It's like traveling all the way. Think about it, the more than 100 odd armed personnel with an elite aura at first glance have not brought any belongings. Only a lunatic will provoke them. Not only were they not attacked along the way, but when they passed through the Don River area, there were two separatist armed leaders who wanted to recruit them. It's ridiculous to think about it. This is what they regard as Romania's most loyal warriors." Christo took someone to pick up Veris's group, and they didn't stay by the river for long, just a short rest. After a group of people got into the car, they were going back to Kazan today, and the accommodation arranged for Verisi and his party has been prepared for a long time, and it is in a dilapidated building in the city. This is not because Christo has no funds, but because this building is close to the Kazan Bank, and it is a relatively remote place, which is the most important for the concealment of more than 100 people. After Christo settled Vasily and his party, he immediately prepared to attack the Bank of Kazan. The time they plan to start is just a few days ago. In addition to being afraid of being exposed to too many people, the Russian Provisional Government's army is about to approach Kazan. Because according to Donovsky's explanation and the intelligence they had learned, someone in the provisional government knew the secret about Kazan's gold. So they don't have much time left. Dear, click in and give a good comment. The higher the score, the faster the update. It is said that those who give full marks to the new ones have found a beautiful wife at the end. The mobile station is newly revised and upgraded. The address, data and bookmarks are synchronized with the computer station. No advertisements. Fresh reading. Chapter 356 Kazan Gold. 4. Have you heard that the frontline army was defeated and many people couldn't come back? Yeah, I heard that someone fled back and said that there are hundreds of thousands of troops in the interim government. It seems that they can only hide in the countryside. But according to some rumors from the government, everyone should be evacuated in the direction of Moscow. It seems that I have to give up not only Kazan, but also Cheboksary. My younger brother's family lives there, and I plan to go to him with my family. It's a pity that my family just bought a piano soon, so I still have to buy it from my family. It was bought at a low price from a nobleman. Don't think about that. It's more important to prepare to escape now. The news that the Belarusian army was approaching made people in Kazan panic, and there were voices of all kinds of discussions. However, at this time, the Kazan government and the defenders were no longer in charge of this. They now have an even more important need to do, which is to gather transport to prepare for evacuation. Contrary to what the city residents were talking about, Motilov, the commander of the garrison, knew more. In Peretz, 40 kilometers away, the Red Army of nearly 100,000 was attacked several times by the White Russian rebels. The heroic Red Army was outnumbered and could only move to the rear. So his task is to make the defeated Red Army able to get material replenishment in Kazan Point. As for the task of defending Kazan, it has now become impossible with the retreat of the frontline army. So Mosilov now needs to mobilize materials, then this requires manpower, and must be strong manpower. After all, there must be resistance among the few supplies from residents. Therefore, the few defending troops at present have become the first choice of Mosilov. Mosilov, who knew the priorities of the matter, immediately called the guards. Send this order to all subordinate units to cooperate with government personnel. Yes, Comrade Commander. The guards took Mosilov's telegram and immediately sent it to the various units. And with the transmission of the order, there was also a riot in Kazan City. Under the leadership of the government staff, the defending troops immediately began to collect materials at the residents' homes in units of squads. For a while, there was a commotion in Kazan City due to the collection of materials. This made Christo, who was preparing for the operation, overjoyed, and he directly called the personnel together for the last meeting before the operation. In the secret and dark basement of the residence behind the tailor's shop. This place is very unpopular. The musty air and peeling walls all show that it has not been used for a long time. But today, it is full of people. Only through the thick dust still in the corner, it can be seen that this is a temporary cleaning, but the cleaning is not thorough enough. As the commander of this operation, Christo was standing in front of a blackboard hanging on the wall, explaining to the main person in charge of the operation. Everyone should have some understanding of the purpose of our operation this time, but I have to say it again here. According to the information we have learned, that Tsar transferred his 6 stored in St. Petersburg and Moscow to Kazan, because of the war. More than 100 tons of gold and a small amount of jewelry. After the Soviet government took over here, only nearly 100 tons were found in the Kazan Reserve Bank. According to our information, the rest is still in the secret vault of the Kazan Reserve Bank. We now have enough knowledge about the location of this vault, so our goal this time is the remaining more than 500 tons of gold in the Bank of Kazan. Christo's words made many people who didn't know the specific situation take a breath. More than 500 tons of gold is a huge amount of wealth, and many people present have not even heard of it. According to the current value of gold on the market, this is a wealth of nearly $1 billion, which can fully enable Romania to build a high seas fleet that will make the British sleepless and rich. Of course, this is strictly in accordance with the gold standard, and banknotes are issued 1-to-1. In fact, no country will implement this standard. Countries that can issue banknotes at a ratio of 1-to-3 or 4-to-4 have a good conscience. For example, the major countries that are currently at war have 1-to-15. And Fredericia was among those who inhaled. As the main person in charge of preparing the tools for the retreat, he was also honored to participate in this secret meeting. Like everyone else, he kept his own plans in mind, which was no problem for intelligence officers. Christo continued to talk, after waiting for everyone to digest what he said. According to our understanding, because the Bank of Kazan is considered to have been evacuated by the Russian government, its defensive forces have also been greatly dispatched to collect evacuation materials. At present, the bank's defensive force is not much, only 70 or 80 people around. The task of capturing the Bank of Kazan will be carried out by Shirka and Veresi. At this time, Shirka, who looked a little dissolute, and Vasily, who was stubborn, stood up and signaled to everyone. Christo continued talking after the two of them sat down. The first time after Shilka and Veresi seized the bank, the transport convoy that you are in charge of, Millet, must keep up. I have already prepared cover for you. It is the material retreat convoy of the city government. I will meet in a while. Bring you a certificate, which is enough to cover you from being interrogated by patrolling soldiers. I saw a middle-aged man dressed like a government official, nodding to Christo, indicating that he already understood. Christo continued. And the rest of you are tasked with creating chaos and keeping their defenders away from the road from the Bank of Kazan to the shipyard. As for your specific arrangements, I will talk about it later. And Christo pointed to a horse-faced man. You bring your own personnel to take charge of the sabotage work at Lovely Bridge. The movement should be louder. It is best to let the defenders think that someone wants to stop the retreating army. Without waiting for ants to answer, Christo pointed to a round-faced man with a dark complexion and traces of wind and sun. Nils, you are in charge of the destruction of the train station. Christo couldn't help But ask one more question here. The railway station has always been a key area for the guards to deploy and control. How is your problem? Christo also aroused the interest of others. The railway station has always been a tightly defended area in the war. If you want to destroy it, you must explain it here. Mills, who was questioned by Christo, still didn't change his face under the attention of everyone, and answered in his low voice. The problem is not too big. I can solve it, as long as you send someone to bring explosives here. Facing Nils' answer, Christo nodded. He is very aware of this style, and as long as he promises, he will be able to do it. Then Christo talked about some related matters and matters needing attention. It wasn't until the meeting was about to end that Christo called Friedrich's name. Frederici, the boat you prepare must be usable and not go wrong. Facing Christo's words, Federic promised. Please rest assured, I'm the most skilled worker in the shipyard, and I will not let the ship break down halfway. After seeing that everything was arranged properly, Christo said to the crowd, then let's all prepare. Tomorrow's actions are about Romania's future, and now let's create this future. It's all for Romania. Chapter 357 Kazan Gold 5. The early morning sun slowly climbed into the sky. The first rays of sunlight shone on the earth, and the quiet city once again showed its vitality. Ivan 4th Street, commemorating the liberators of Kazan. The Kazan Reserve Bank has not been rejuvenated. Yurif, who was yawning with a hint of unwillingness to retreat from sleepiness on his face, was changing shifts with his partner. Yurif will leave it to you here. The comrade in arms, who had just finished the night shift, impatiently handed the rifle on his body to the two of them, dragged his tired body, and left after leaving this sentence, and they hurried back to make up for their sleep. Yurif glanced at his comrades who left, yawned a long time, and complained to his partner with satisfaction. It's unfortunate. Why don't you dispatch us to collect supplies? Listening to Yurif's words, Dovsky, his partner, fiddled with his rifle and replied, is it exciting to see other companies going back to the barracks? Facing Dovsky's words, Yurif said disdainfully, you are not envious. I heard that someone collected a gold watch when collecting supplies. Yurif's words stopped Dovsky from continuing to tinker with the worn-out rifle. I saw him reply, who doesn't envy, but who made our lovely company commander not get the task of dispatching. Yurif remembered what happened a few days ago, and couldn't help but say, if only the bank we were guarding had money. Dovsky remembered what happened a few days ago, and couldn't help but say, stop dreaming, all the money in the bank has been emptied. If you still have it, don't you want to be meticulous for a few nights? Dovsky's words reminded Yurif of the scene where the company commander and platoon commander kept patrolling, and he couldn't help shivering. The taste of it was really uncomfortable. So he chose to branch off the topic. I hope to have better luck next time, and I can send us out to make a small fortune. No chance. Why? Did you get any news? Yurif was a little surprised by Dovsky's words. He knew that this partner had an older brother who was a commuter in the regiment, and he was well informed. Seeing Yurif's face full of desire for knowledge, Dovsky, who was satisfied, said, I heard that our regiment will dispatch people to strengthen the guard along the railway line. We have been assigned because of our poor business spirit, and it is estimated that the order will be issued in 2 days. Dovsky's words made Yurif complain. Damn luck. Looking at Yurif complaining, Dovsky felt the same way. Who doesn't want to make a small fortune to improve their life? They are tired of eating potatoes every day, and they haven't had a drink for a long time. Think about it. This is at least closer to your home. Dovsky knew what happened to his partner Yurif. This guy lives in Chibakris, not far from Kazan, and has a sister in addition to his parents. Hearing Dovsky's words made Yurif even more worried. He sighed and said, I don't know if they have mobilized to relocate. My hometown is also within the scope of relocation. Dovsky was about to say something comforting when he heard the sound of a car driving from far to near with good ears, which made him pay attention. Everyone had seen the car, but it was different than Yurif, who had only been in the army for less than 3 months. He knows more, but he knows that there are not many cars that can be driven in the city of Kazan, and they are all concentrated in the hands of the government and the army. Is there any character coming to inspect it? The look of Dovsky's looking around caught Yurif's attention, and at this time he heard it and couldn't help but look around. At this time, there were several square-headed cars on the corner of the street, where few people were present. This is the best selling Dongfeng truck in the world. In order to keep out the wind and rain, the trucks also pulled up a cover over the carriage. What kind of mission is this? Yurif kept asking about his knowledgeable partner. Probably in the face of Yurif's question. Dovsky answered somewhat uncertainly. Just as the two were talking, the convoy stopped at the bank. At this time, a few people came down from the cab and walked towards the two of them. One of the leaders, who was wearing an officer's uniform with a sturdy face, said directly before they could ask, "Are you soldiers of the 2nd Regiment and 6th Company?" Facing the officer's question, the most experienced Dovsky replied, "Yes, I don't know who you are. I'm Major Ivan of the City Defense Command. I'm here to perform a mission." Speaking of which, Major Ivan reached into his chest pocket and took out a folded piece of paper. "This is my mission order, and it needs to be handed over to your company commander." While this Major Ivan was talking with Dovsky, an entourage who followed Major Ivan in civilian clothes walked to Yurif and took out a pack of cigarettes and asked, "Are you smoking?" Thanks. Yurif, who had been out of cigarettes for a long time, couldn't help but took one out of the cigarette case, and instantly he had a good impression of this stranger. Snapped. The man pulled out a lighter and lit Yurif a cigarette. His Yurif took a sip, feeling that every cell in his body was stimulated by the cigarette, and he immediately felt different. Yurif, who was intoxicated, didn't notice that the man who lit his cigarette was watching him and observing the conversation next to him with his peripheral vision. When Dovsky took orders from Major Ivan, the entourage stepped forward and covered Yurif's mouth. Before he understood what was going on, he hugged his head and twisted it hard. A slight click sounded. Yurif, who was stunned, lowered his arms weakly and grabbed the cigarette he had just smoked in his hand. Fell at his feet. Yurif's gradually dissipating eyes happened to see that Dovsky was also held by the same Major Ivan. His head was twisted in a strange position, and his eyes were full of surprise. After solving the guards in just 2 or 3 seconds, Vasily, who pretended to be Major Ivan, supported the trembling corpse of the guards and whispered to the people behind them who were covering them, "Lal, Russ, come and pretend to be guards. Others come with me." After Veris's voice fell, the curtains dropped behind several cars were lifted, and people in Soviet uniforms and weapons jumped out of the trucks one after another. The few pedestrians on the street and the slack of the defenders during the day made the next action extremely smooth. The hall, the duty room, the 2nd floor, and the 3rd floor were quietly taken down by a group of people. Among them, the commander of the garrison, the company commander, was caught by Verisy while fooling around with a girl with freckles in the former governor's office on the 3rd floor. Captain Vadnov, who thought he was discovered by the inspection officers and had no idea that he was already at the gate of hell, ended his life in this way. The only thing that made him happy was that a girl was walking with him on the way to heaven. After all this, Vasily, who was tired and sweating on his forehead, told his subordinates who were in the same situation, "Ruler, you let Shurka bring that Donovsky here. Now it's time for him to show his value." After he finished speaking, he dragged his tired body and said to his subordinates, "Take the time to rest. We will be busy in a while." Shurka, who had been waiting for a long time, took Donovsky into the bank immediately. "Go this way." Donovsky, who led the way in front, led the crowd through the hall and aisle to the small garden behind the bank. On the road, Donovsky also explained to everyone the secret vault was already considered when the building was built. In order to prevent theft, many new technologies were used at that time, such as steel and concrete structures, the use of rotor locks for doors and other heights technology for concealment and confusion. The exit is also outside the building. After arriving at the small garden, Donovsky walked to a separate hut in the corner. This tool room is where the exit is. As soon as everyone entered the tool room, they saw the tools sparsely thrown aside. Looking at these messy tools, with obvious signs of reaction, Donovsky looked to a corner. After finding the untouched trace, he pointed to it and said to Shilka and Vasily, "The entrance is here." Vasily stepped forward and knocked on the ground and the wall and said with some doubts, "This is solid. Are you sure it is here?" Facing Vasily's words, Donovsky nodded and said, "Yes, you only need to dig half a meter deep." This is easy. Abbott, Coles, Donik, come and dig here. The few people named by Vasily had big arms and round waists. and at first glance they were suitable for this kind of thing. A few people who were digging here with tools dug it out in no time. At this time, a solid channel constructed of steel and reinforced concrete appeared. After everyone waited for the air to dissipate for a while, they walked inside with the lights on, and the passage suddenly opened up after a few steps. At this time, Donofsky walked to a corner and pointed to a position with a small door open and said, "This is the power generation room." Vasily pointed at the two of them. "You go to generate electricity." The roaring generator sounded in the vault, immediately lighting up the place. Donofsky walked over to a metal door and said, "This is the vault door." Hearing Donofsky's words, Vasily said to him, "Now that the location is known, let us do the rest." Work. As Vasily's voice fell, the others who followed immediately began to prepare tools. Looking at the group taking out the explosives and cutting machine, Donofsky said in surprise, "Are you going to blow up the gate here?" "Yes, this is the fastest way. You can rest assured that we are professional and will not hurt you." Hearing Vasily's words, Donofsky said with a bit of tears and laughter, "There is no need for this. I have the key." Donofsky's words stopped everyone's movements, and the air was full of embarrassment. Vasily gave Shurka a special look for the sake of it. Shurka said embarrassedly, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "But you didn't ask." As Donofsky opened the door to the vault, a glittering scene appeared in front of everyone. Everyone was stunned for a while, and Donofsky, who had seen such a scene once before, couldn't help but indulge in it. Because of the different nature, the gold used to belong to the Russian government, but now a small part of it belongs to itself. Vasily replied first. He stepped forward and picked up a piece of gold to examine it. It was also engraved with the Russian initials of the Reserve Bank. "Okay, let's get to work now." Ruler asked everyone to prepare all this gold to be packed and ready to be shipped to the shipyard. Vasily's words made everyone recover, and the group began to put gold into the prepared wooden box. There are still words on the box, such as food, ammunition, etc. These are prepared by Christo, and they have 3,000 such boxes. Most of them are still in the transport fleet that Millet is responsible for, and these vehicles will also join them for transportation. Of course, in order to ensure the safety of the team, the cooperation of others in the plan is now required. Time to distract the defenders. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358 Kazengold 6. Nils walked into the train station as usual, while Shurka and Vasily took the bank. The heavily guarded train station is like his home, allowing him to come and go freely. Comrade Shidnov, please cooperate with us in the inspection now. But this time, Nils was stopped by the guards when he entered the station. Seeing that the other station staff were treated like this, Nils also spread his hands generously. Then please check. Then he continued to ask casually, "Peter, is there a big man at the station today?" Faced with Nils' words, Peter, the guard who was meticulously examining him, said, "I'm sorry, I can't answer your question. It's going to be a mistake." After the inspection, no suspicious items were found, only a small alarm clock was in his hand. And the guards naturally let him in. Other workers who had been inspected also greeted Nils when they saw Nils walk in. Shidnov, good morning. Ivan, you are early too. Shidnov, don't you find it troublesome to have an alarm clock every day? Get used to it, you can't forget it. Nils greeted the co-workers all the way, past the patrolling soldiers all the way, and finally came to his own post. That's right, Nils is an indispensable switchman at every station, specializing in the tracks that go in and out of train boards. Nils walked slowly into the workshop beside the railway tracks of the station, put on his uniform, and put the alarm clock into his work bag, which also contained tools such as the inverted pole that he usually used. At this time, he looked up and looked around and found no one, and took out a black iron box from his cabinet. Lifting the lid of the box revealed a jumble of parts, wires, and batteries in front of him, with a book under it. Nils carefully opened the book, and there were several detonators and explosives at the bottom of the iron box. He took out the detonator and explosives, bundled them together, and connected the wires to the detonator. Then take out the battery and connect one end to the line and the other end to the beeping wheel of the alarm clock with the back cover removed. Then bundle it with a detonator mounted dynamite and a simple ticking time bomb is ready. See the work made in a few minutes. Niles laughed at himself. Fortunately, the craftsmanship is not unfamiliar. After finishing it, Niles closed his closet and walked out of the workshop. Next is a moment to unleash the power of this little guy. Niles already has a target. He knows that some ammunition is still stored in the warehouse. This is the perfect target to create chaos and the movement is definitely loud enough. Niles walked slowly towards the warehouse at the station. There were many soldiers patrolling back and forth along the way, and he was not nervous at all, and even greeted the soldiers he knew. Just as he was about to reach the warehouse, a high-pitched whistle sounded in the station, and at this time a group of soldiers ran out, and they were on guard at the nearest railroad track near the warehouse. Niles took the opportunity to retreat to the warehouse and listen to the speech of the leading officer, trying to find out the most useful information for him. Alert. The train is coming soon. No one else is allowed to approach. The words of the leading officer gave Niles a lot of useful information. There is a train to the station, and it is very important. No doctors and nurses are not transporting the wounded. Stopping at the platform, and by the warehouse, it seems to be transporting important materials. Through the look of a group of waiting soldiers standing next to the warehouse, Niles determined that this was going to be moved to the warehouse for temporary storage. After analysis, Niles felt that this was his chance. He retreated to an unoccupied corner, quietly took out the prepared time bomb from the tool bag, and inserted it into his waist, completely covering it with the slightly fluffy station uniform. The bomb on the waist. When ready, Niles stepped aside and waited for his chance. Within 2 minutes, a train, still smelling of gunpowder, was sprayed with steam and stopped on the railroad tracks guarded by soldiers. There are a lot of materials covered by canvas on the flat carriage, and there are even uncovered artillery and ammunition boxes at the rear. At this time, the transport soldiers who had been waiting for it immediately stepped forward to carry it, and Niles observed a good time to place the time bomb at this time. Through nearly 10 minutes of observation, Niles saw a good opportunity. It turned out that many of the materials transported at this time were quilts to keep out the cold at night, and these were all trapped in large packages. When the two teams of transport soldiers were blocked from sight by an angle, Niles quickly stepped forward and took out a time bomb from his waist. After setting the time, he stuffed it into the big bag that fell on the last transport soldier. In the quilt, even at this time he still had time to cover up the traces he put in. Then he pretended to pass by and left here quietly. From beginning to end, the soldier whose shoulders resisted the quilt did not notice that the goods had been touched. Carried directly to the warehouse next to the ammunition to unload the load on the shoulder. Then, gasping for breath, he began to carry out the work again and again. After finishing all this, Niles returned to the workshop and changed his clothes and quietly left the train station on the grounds that he had suffered from an old problem in his waist under the concern of the workers. At this time, the small alarm clock placed on the time bomb in the quilt has 5 minutes to go before it rings. 5 minutes later, a loud explosion sounded from the station's warehouse, and the ammunition stored in the warehouse was detonated by a time bomb placed by Niles. The impact of the explosion turned the warehouse into powder, and it also triggered ammunition on the train parked next to it, and the successive explosions even threw a cannon high, and the barrel was smashed on the station building. The Soviet-Russian soldiers who were being transported and guarded suffered heavy casualties. A Soviet-Russian commander who witnessed all this defending the station said with a trembling voice to the motionless staff officer beside him, "Call Comrade Mosilov and let him know that the explosion at the station cannot be ruled out as the possibility of an enemy spy." Disturbed by the commander's order, the staff member returned to God and immediately hurry to make a phone call like a rabbit being chased by a man. And the fact does not require them to make a phone call. The explosion of the train station has already spread throughout the city of Kazan, and Mosilov, the commander, immediately sent someone to inspect where the explosion was made. When he learned that it was the explosion at the train station, Moshilov's heart sank, and he immediately ordered the army to stop collecting supplies, give priority to the protection of the station, the wharf, the city government and other key points, and at the same time, ordered martial law point. But before his orders reached the army, explosions sounded in other parts of the city. And these consecutive explosions made him make a wrong judgment point, immediately dispatch the army to protect the railways, docks, and bridges and tunnels, and there must be no mistakes in the lines of communication point. Looking at the anxious comrade Moshilov, the staff officer rushed to give orders in 3 steps and 2 steps in the Kazan Reserve Bank. Shirka and Verisi also heard the explosion. This made them move the gold much faster, and Millet, who was in charge of the transportation, had already arrived at the bank with the convoy. After filling more than a dozen trucks with gold, Millet personally led the team to the shipyard, where Fredericia and others were already waiting for their arrival point. Looking at the departing convoy, Shirka and Vasily wiped the sweat from their foreheads, and the dozens of operatives who came with it too also slumped in the hall for a while. Carrying more than 30 tons of gold in one go is all physical work. It takes manpower to pack boxes and load them into the car, especially at the entrance. Only 2 people can pass through it, which is more tiring. No wonder they are tired. And Vasily, who took a rest and took a sigh of relief, stood up at this time. Okay, let's move on. Time is running out. We must finish moving here today. Seeing everyone standing up, Shilka raised his hand and poked Donovsky beside him and asked out of breath, "How long did it take you to move in?" 3 days. It took nearly 300 guard soldiers 3 days and nights to move. When Shilka heard this, he sighed and said, "This is the most tiring job I've ever moved. I knew I should change it with someone else." Vasily stepped forward and pulled him up and said with a smile, "It's a pity you don't have a chance." Facing Vasily's smile, Shirka said with a look of disgust, "You better stop laughing. I feel panicked when I see it." After he finished speaking, he pointed to his arm and gestured at Veris's arm, which was thicker than his thigh, and said, "My little body is not as strong as you animals." Facing Shirka's words, Vasily did not answer. He just slapped him on the shoulder with a thick hand, causing Shilka, whose shoulders were already sore, to grin instantly. Shilka's actions filled the hall with laughter, and everyone felt that their fatigue was relieved a lot. Christo's plan was carried out perfectly with the misjudgment of the Kazan garrison commander Moshilov. On that day, the attention of the Soviet and Russian troops was on the main traffic routes and important strongholds. For the Kazan Bank, which has no important value other than a phone call to inquire at that time, no one else was sent. The transportation work for Verisi and others was much easier. After all, no one wanted an accident. As for Millet's transport convoy, it was also transporting this batch of Russian wealth back and forth on the empty streets. Faced with the appearance of an army escorting important supplies, few Kazan residents dared to go forward to observe, except for the patrols they encountered during the last 2 transports, which can be said to be smooth all the way. As for the patrols, I was intimidated by Millet's pretense that this was an important mission you couldn't handle. In the evening of the same day, the more than 500 tons of gold that was still in the Kazan Reserve Bank early in the morning had been transported to the shipyard, and 2 passenger and cargo transport ships were ready to depart. After all the evacuated people boarded the ship, Christo ordered, "Go." To ships laden with Edel's expectations and Russian wealth slowly left the shore and headed for the lower Volga. The first step of the plan was executed flawlessly. In Romania's Baroque palace that night, Miluk, who was in charge of the matter, reported to Edel I just received the news that the first step of the plan has been successful, and the goods are already on the ship. Facing Miluk's words, Edel glanced at the grey-haired intelligence chief and said, "Understood. You have to ensure the safety of the cargo." Yes, Your Majesty. Miluk, who was nearly half a century old, withdrew. When Edel saw the intelligence chief leave, the originally stretched brows frowned again. Chapter 359. The flu is coming. The news of the Kazan gold didn't ease his worries. It turned out that there was a report on his desk showing an outbreak of influenza in Romania. This news opened Edda's dusty memory, and a term Spanish flu appeared in his mind. Edda immediately asked the health department to investigate the symptoms of the flu and let the Foreign Affairs Department know the situation in Britain and France. The Ministry of Health didn't understand why the king took the flu so seriously, but quickly gave the symptoms they learned. Headache, high fever, muscle aches and loss of appetite are the current flu symptoms, and the conclusion given by the Ministry of Health is that this flu is somewhat similar to the flu that broke out in France, but it is not dangerous. And the infected people are mainly young and middle-aged people, who form the army and become the hardest hit area. It also stopped the Moldavian army, which had advanced to Suceava, for the time being. As the commander of the army, General Courtois had to devote a lot of energy and medicine to take care of these soldiers infected with influenza. At present, a large number of transport ships purchase medicines for the treatment of influenza from all over the world and transport them through the Bulgarian railway. Of course, the Romanian army was uncomfortable, and the German army as its opponent was even more uncomfortable. This army, which assembled a large number of elite German troops on the Eastern Front, was as vulnerable to the flu virus. A large number of soldiers also fell ill with the same symptoms as in Romania. This caused a headache for Marshal Mackensen as his commander. He did not have the same massive amount of medicines from the allied countries as Admiral Courtois, so in addition to collecting flu medicines on the new territories on the Eastern Front, he could only ask Hindenburg and Ludendorff for help. The two people who had already been infected with influenza virus by the soldiers on the Western Front and had their scalps scratched, in addition to a batch of medicines, only had a telegram for them to raise by themselves. The angry Marshal Mackensen yelled at the headquarters, but he also got angry in the headquarters, and he could only ask the Chief of Staff, Major General Hoffmann, to go to raise it and work hard to restore the state of the army as soon as possible. One more thing needs to be said here. To deal with the current situation and to appease the Polish and Ukrainians, freshly baked Polish and Ukrainian governments have been formed in the new German occupied territories. The former currently has only a few former Russian territories such as Warsaw, while the latter currently has vast former Russian territories such as Kyiv, Vinnytsia, and Odessa. Moreover, in order to allow the new Ukrainian government to participate in the war with Romania, the East Moldavia region, which had occupied the majority of Romanian people and was originally included in Russia, was also given to the Ukrainian government. The move by the Germans allowed the newly established Ukrainian regime to surpass Romania in one fell swoop and occupy the 7th position in Europe. This also made Romanian domestic sentiments aroused, and they all demanded to give the German puppet regime some color. However, the kings, prime ministers, and others who were high-level officials of the kingdom scoffed at the Germans' actions to distract them. Everyone knows that, as long as Germany falls, the new regimes will have to spit out as much territory as they want. Do they still have the strength and confidence to resist the demands of the Allies in private? In order to be conservative, Edel also ordered his chief of guards to arrange manpower to win over the Romanians in East Moldavia. The situation is not bad, considering the strong consideration of the same family in Romania. These high-level officials have accepted the olive branch of the Romanian government with joy. Therefore, the key at present is to repel the German invasion, so that everyone can see the strength of Romania, so that no one has the wrong idea. Of course, the current domestic influenza Edel also pays attention to it. After all, he is not a yellow race. Influenza is as deadly as Romania, but not as high as I remember. Edel asked the guards to call the Prime Minister and the Minister in charge of healthcare, Hulk. After all, the flu also affects social life in Romania. The Hulk, who previously served as the director of the Bucharest Royal Hospital, is a figure who is both knowledgeable about medical care and loyal to the royal family. When Edel was still the prince, he was mentioned by the old king to work in the health department. During this period, the results were good, and the hospitals in various places were renovated, focusing on the handling and regulation of quack doctors and tips. Let the Romanian dare to go to the hospital for treatment after being sick, which is a practical talent. Now this round-faced and chubby minister was led by the Prime Minister to Edel. After the two saluted, Edel asked directly, "Sir Hulk, what is your health department's response to this flu?" In the face of the king's inquiry, Hulk didn't know why the king was so concerned about the flu, but he still said straight, "Your Majesty, our health department mainly distributes medicines for this flu and sends people to monitor areas where the flu may break out. In addition, we also send people to publicize measures to prevent influenza. For those who have been infected, we mainly distribute medicines for treatment." Hearing Hulk's words, Edel thought about the virus that scared the people of the country in his previous life, and the measures that the powerful government took to deal with the virus. After trying hard for a while, Edel asked the Minister of Health in front of him, "Are those who contract the flu forced to quarantine?" Facing the king's question, Hulk answered truthfully, "There are many people who have left after a while because of life, but we have prescribed medicine for them and told them to eat it. I don't think there is anyone. Don't care about your body." Facing Hulk's answer, Edel said directly, "That's not enough." In the face of the king's words, Hulk was a little puzzled. At present, the health department under his leadership has responded to the flu. Even British and French journalists reported that they responded quickly and responded appropriately, not losing to the British and French governments. He was happy for a few days because of this, and now the king's words made him wonder what he didn't do well. In fact, the current measures of the Romanian health department are also the main response methods of European and American countries. Influenza breaks out almost every 2 years, and all countries have a set of countermeasures, all of which are similar, and Edel didn't care about Hulk's puzzled expression. He couldn't say that there would be a wave of influenza with a very high fatality rate next. In this case, could Edel say that it was God's response to him? And if so, the Vatican would consecrate him. Therefore, Edel can only issue an executive order. Hulk, I don't think such measures are enough. In order to show the importance the kingdom attaches to its subjects, I think it is necessary to strictly control the flu. First of all, we need to treat patients in a centralized isolation type, and medical staff need to take adequate protective measures. We will also send government staff to investigate whether people in each jurisdiction have fever and cold symptoms. If so, the patient will be taken to a hospital for intensive treatment, and family members must be quarantined to observe whether they have the same symptoms. Disinfect various public places, and at the same time, publicize that everyone should not go out as much as possible, and also need to be prepared for a possible outbreak of virus infection. Facing Edel's countermeasures, Hulk took a deep breath and glanced at the Prime Minister secretly. It is no wonder that the Prime Minister is called. These measures cannot be dealt with by their health department and require the cooperation of various government departments. After Edel finished speaking, Prime Minister Bricianu sorted out the language and asked, "Your Majesty, this will have an adverse impact on the current war, and the cost of funds and manpower will be too high. Is it worth it?" Facing the Prime Minister's inquiry, Edel replied, "It is worth doing this. It can ensure the safety of our subjects' lives." But the king's words did not resonate with the Prime Minister because the impact was too great. During the war, a lot of materials were used for domestic protection against influenza, which in his opinion was not worth it at all. Seeing the Prime Minister who responded silently, Edel could only continue to persuade from another angle. The current situation on the battlefield is already obvious, and the allies are almost out of strength to fight. We can't be too hard. You can see those Italy. Of course, the Prime Minister knew about the Italians Edel spoke of. Under the planning of Karoli, the Austro-Hungarian and German troops launched an attack on the Italian army defending the Piave River. The German-Austrian coalition of nearly 800,000 troops, the German army with only 4 divisions, attacked the Italian army defending her attack. At this time, the Italian army, instigated by Britain and France, also planned to regain the lost ground, and as a result, a pinpoint confrontation with Maimang started on the banks of the Piave River. As a result, the Italians lost another game, with a loss of 160,000 people, and even Udine was captured by Austria-Hungary. The German and Austrian armies are currently approaching the city of Venice, and are preparing to seize this world-famous cultural city. In the face of Edel's persuasion, the Prime Minister finally succumbed. The government issued an announcement the day after leaving the palace. Officials and staff at all levels are being asked to respond to the flu in accordance with the newly issued precautionary measures document. This made the medical staff and government personnel on the front line scolded. Isn't this increasing their already busy workload? And the Romanian people couldn't understand the new government measures to prevent influenza. for a time, because of Ed's request. Romania was full of chickens and dogs in the face of everyone's incomprehension. Edel can only say that you will not know its importance until the virus appears. In his mind, he remembered that the number of deaths from the flu exceeded the number of deaths on the battlefield. Is it like that? Edel's memory of this is already a little vague, and he can't remember the number of deaths from the flu at that time. Anyway, he only knows that this is a big event. Chapter 360 Kazan Gold 7. When the chickens were flying around in Romania because of the flu, Christo and his party finally arrived at the next point, at Tsaritsyn, by boat. However, instead of docking at Tsaritsyn, they docked next to a riverside town called Yora's upstream. The boat ride for several days in a row made the whole group a little tired physically and mentally. This is not because everyone is tired from the boat ride, but it is not peaceful along the way. During the few days of sailing, they encountered several waves of small groups of armed forces, including the Soviet Russian Red Army, the White Army, and other armed forces. For this reason, they also exchanged fire with two of them across the river, but because they have ships and strong firepower, these armed forces have nothing to do with it. After some small twists and turns, they finally arrived at their first destination. Christo took everyone to the shore, and the reception staff here had prepared food and shelter for them. Christo took a sip of the steaming mushroom soup inside. I never thought the mushroom stewed fish soup tasted so good. Johnny, who was standing aside to meet their chief executive, disguised as a local businessman codenamed Elk, said, "The main reason is that the deputy director hasn't had a good meal for many days. So whatever you eat is delicious." Faced with Johnny, who was well dressed and wore a wig more like a poet than a businessman, Christo said with a smile, "Your flattery is getting worse, so it's just right to pretend to be a businessman." In the face of Christo's teasing, Johnny answered without shame, "Isn't that the boss you know and make good use of?" After Christo took another sip of fish soup to warm his stomach, he asked the questions he cared about. Although he had already learned about it through the telegram, it was better to ask in person for more specific information. How is the situation here now? In the face of the deputy director's inquiry, Johnny also answered seriously, "At present, Tsaritsyn has fallen into the hands of a temporary government army led by Denikin. According to the information, he has obtained a lot of weapons and equipment, relying on the convenience here. The traffic of the army is calling for the training of the army, and it seems that it wants to cooperate with the main force of the provisional government army in Gozak. Christo certainly knew the man who had served as Kornilov's chief of staff, and was currently succeeding him as commander of the Don and Caucasus interim government forces. And he also knew where the weapons and ammunition came from, and Romania also contributed a lot. However, this time, the gold delivery had to be concealed from the General Denikin. He didn't want to sacrifice the Russian general with strong patriotic sentiments for nothing. So are there any other armed forces around here? Some. About 30 kilometers north of us there was a small force, led by about 600 men, a former Russian major named Rodsky. 40 kilometers to the southwest, there was another force, organized by a local Cossack leader named Fisk. There were more than 400 of them. In addition, on the Don River, 25 kilometers north of the next contact point, Vyriks, there is also a Cossack army, led by about 500 people, a former cavalry officer named Salov. As for the dozen or so people who can't pose a threat to the team, I won't say anything. Christo knew what Johnny meant. These dozen or so people were basically wandering soldiers or robbers. These people basically did not pose a threat to transportation, and it was difficult to count them. Maybe if you investigate today, he will go to another place tomorrow. Looks like this is our most dangerous journey. Christo said to himself in his mouth, and then he asked, "So how many vehicles and people can you use now?" "I have prepared 8 trucks here, 5 of which are heavy trucks with a load of 5 tons, and there are 34 people on hand." After deducting the drivers. Having said this, Johnny complained, "I originally prepared 13 cars, but a lot of them were robbed by the armed gangs entrenched nearby. In order to prevent accidents, I didn't dare to make extra efforts. You did the right thing." After praising him, Christo pointed to the boat parked by the river and said, "We brought 7 vehicles from Kazan, but they were all old-fashioned 1-ton trucks." Speaking of which, Christo couldn't help complaining, "Don't these Russians know the benefits of 5-ton trucks at all? We dare not use a large number of 5-ton trucks in order to ensure safety. When Christo complained, he wronged the previous Russian government, and they bought a lot of 5-ton trucks. However, due to the damage of the war and the vast territory, the 5-ton truck became a rare vehicle everywhere. In fact, even 1 ton of old-fashioned Dongfeng trucks are currently mostly recruited into the armies of both sides. Hearing his boss's complaints, as a subordinate, of course he needs to come up with a solution, and Johnny is of course a qualified subordinate. Boss, I'm afraid there won't be enough vehicles, so I've prepared hundreds of horses and another 20 carriages. In the face of Johnny's words, Christo said directly, there is no need to consider the carriage. This thing can't keep up with the speed of the truck. Instead, it will make the transportation target larger and take greater risks in terms of safety. Christo thought about it and turned to call his entourage. Let Captain Vasily come over. Okay, boss. After a few minutes, the sturdy Vasily appeared in front of him. Boss, what's the matter? Looking at the burly man in front of him, Christo asked directly, your man, is there any problem with riding a horse? Vasily, who thought it was a big event, replied directly, there is no problem at all. My people can ride horses well. Arrange for your people to rest today. Tomorrow, you will be responsible for escorting the goods to a small town called Virix by the Don River. I will send Shirka and your entourage to meet the receptionists over there, and Johnny will send someone as a guide, and he'll scout the neighborhood for you. Christo's words made Vasily give a small smile to Johnny standing beside him, which was also responded by the disguised businessman. Then he looked at the map spread out in front of him, and Johnny was responsible for repeating the situation around him. After listening to the explanation, Vasily's forehead wrinkled, and he said, the armed forces on this road are not weak, and we need to be fully armed to protect them. Christo knew the Vasilean definition of being fully armed. As the person in charge of the entire action plan, he also attaches great importance to escorting the escorts. The situation in Russia is deteriorating by the fact that there are 3 armed gangs entrenched on the road from Ulis to Fisk in just over 100 kilometers. The equipment of Vasily and others is also very sophisticated. Installed with quadruple telescopic sights, there are more than a dozen machine gun rifles specially designed to facilitate their actions. In addition, in order to allow them to suppress firepower, they were equipped with 13 machine guns, 3 of which were Maxim heavy machine guns, and the rest were Madsen light machine guns used by one person. In addition, the company's newly developed 81mm caliber portable mortar is also equipped with 2. This kind of mortar, which weighs only 61 kilograms, is very suitable for the operations of a capable force like them behind enemy lines. They only need 2 people or a horse to run around with them. So facing the armed forces of hundreds of people, Vasily felt that it was best to be fully equipped for the sake of safety. Okay, then, let's go get ready and leave tomorrow. After seeing Christo agree to his request, Vasily gave him a military salute and left. Looking at Vasily who left, Christo turned his head and said to Johnny, now let's talk about the nearby terrain and traffic conditions. Is there anything I need to pay attention to? Okay boss. Chapter 361 Kazangold. 8. The clouds from the Black Sea in early April brought enough water vapor, which led to an increase in rain, which fell on the ground in a fluttering manner. On the vast plains, green grass grows densely under the moisturization of rain. The muddy state of the road also brought inconvenience to pedestrians. Among them, Verisi and his party felt the various troubles brought about by this inconvenience. Riding on a Don Hippo, he looked a little embarrassed now. His body was covered with muddy water, and even the pure black horse under his crotch was stained by the muddy water. Like him, there are more than 100 subordinates who are guarding him. Now everyone is like rolling in the mud. Squeak. The sound of a series of brakes sounded, making him alert. What happened? He asked loudly to the subordinate who opened the way ahead. The front was hit by a big pit, and the car couldn't get through. The answer from the Pathfinder subordinate made him stop. Roller, send a team to fill the pit, send another team to erect the planks, and the others to be on guard. As Vasily's voice fell, the guards dispersed, leaving only 2 teams. One of the group of people, holding iron rods and other tools in their hands. It seems that they are filling the pit. Another group of people walked behind a car full of wooden boards, apparently planning to fill the pit and erect wooden boards to allow vehicles to pass. It can be seen from a lot of sludge still sticking to the wooden board that it was used a lot along the waypoint after Vasily instructed his subordinates. He also got off the horse to checkpoint. This is a large crater formed by the impact of the flood. It can be seen from the fallen grass that the flood should have hit here last night, and the turbid pool of water not far from his right hand seemed to be his destination point. Vasily, who was looking for trouble by the muddy road, couldn't help but complain when he saw this. Damn the weather, damn Shilka point. Vasily had reason to complain about this guy. After the first shipment of gold from Ulyss arrived in Vilix, this cunning guy stayed on the grounds of understanding the local area, so Vasily was left to bring people back along the way. And today is their second time transporting gold. I didn't expect the heavy rain last night to make the road so difficult point, but Vasily just complained. He did not dare to neglect this transportation task at all. Along the way, the terrain on both sides of the road was outlined by him, and he personally went forward to check the places that might be ambushed point. It was he who led by example along the way, so that his subordinates did not dare to relax, so this task has been smooth so far. Of course, this also has a lot to do with the route they choose point. Alright point, after a while of construction, the puddle was covered with mud and covered with wooden boards to allow cars to pass. Verisi and his party are on their way again point. After the noisy motorcade left, the road was quiet again, and in the woods farther from the road, a bunch of branches shook and a person emerged from it point. He looked at the departing side of the convoy and muttered to himself, the convoy guarded by so many people must be of great value. Fortunately, I stay far away, otherwise it may be discovered point. After he finished speaking, he moved his limbs that were a little stiff, thinking in his heart whether there was only one such team or many times. But looking at their battles, even escorting them many times is not a good bone to chew on. The equipment was better than the guards he knew in the army, and it seemed difficult to take them down point. He plans to rest for a night nearby and try again in the next 2 days to see if he can find some clues. But whether to go to the widow's house in the village in the east or to the sister Flower's house in the west, this made it difficult for him to choose point. In the next 2 days, the team led by Vasily appeared again, and all this was seen by him point. Then he asked the locals to learn more about the situation, and then rode his horse and headed north. He needed to inform his leader of the news, and the north seems to be the armed gang led by Johnny Rodsky, a former Russian major. 32 kilometers north of the town of Ulyss, there is a town called Maloyev, and the armed group led by Rodsky is currently entrenched here point. It used to be a relatively well-known town near Tserazin. It mainly produces grain and dairy products, and the residents live a good life. Over the years, the war has destroyed the economic foundation here, and the recruitment of soldiers and the collection of materials have repeatedly had the name of this town. No matter how wealthy a small town is, it can't stand such a surge, and a large number of farmers have gone bankrupt and abandoned their land. And Maloyev, famous for his agricultural products, also declined rapidly point. But this is not a hardship. When the Soviet Union came to power, the Russian Civil War broke out. The collapse of the government's control has caused the rapid deterioration of regional security, and Maloyev's tragic career has just begun. As the origin of grain, this small town with little protection was immediately targeted. At that time, an armed gang of nearly 100 people occupied the place point. The armed forces led by Rodsky continued to occupy the town in a grand manner after dispelling the armed forces. In the face of being occupied by different armed forces one after another, the life of the residents of the town is even more depressing. Now potatoes and wild vegetables can be regarded as a sumptuous meal in the residents' homes. In contrast, the Rodsky armed forces have enough food supply every day, and many young people who have nowhere to go join it, which increases the speed of the town's decline point. Today, the town is decorated with lanterns. This is not a happy event. It's Rodsky's birthday, so it's another squeeze point in the town's largest and most luxurious manor. A banquet is starting. In the middle of the hall, a dozen or so young girls with hungry faces and smiling faces danced stiffly in revealing clothes, while a group of ferocious armed leaders were drinking and having fun. One after another, lustful eyes swept towards the girls from time to time, causing them to tremble with fright, and the girls' actions caused a burst of laughter in this smoky hall. As a birthday object, Rodsky sat in the back and looked at him, but he turned a blind eye. The leader's indulgence made the leaders more courageous, and someone even stepped forward and touched the dancing girl, which caused another burst of laughter. A gray-haired old man sitting on Rodski's right hand looked embarrassed at the banquet. Rodski, who had noticed him long ago, asked, "Mayor Rodolf, do you have any dissatisfaction with the actions of the officers and soldiers?" Facing the malicious questioning from the leaders in front of him, the mayor of Rodolf gave a chill and quickly replied, "No, General, I'm not dissatisfied at all. The soldiers usually work hard to protect your safety, and it is understandable to indulge occasionally. Understand. In the face of Rodski's brazen words, Mayor Rodolf did not dare to resist at all. He was already the third mayor under the Rodski, and the first two were killed for failing to fully carry out the demon's orders. His family was also killed together. How could Rod not tremble in fear? As for escaping, it became very dangerous after Rodski took over the town. There are many wooden poles standing outside the town, all of which are the corpses of escapees. While Mayor Rodolf was embarrassed in this smoky environment, a spy suddenly appeared in front of everyone. When the other leaders saw the spy, they all greeted him. Medley, today is the general's birthday. You are late. Is there any good news to tell you guys? Medley, I'm going to put you down this time. From the greetings of many leaders, you can see that this spy is extraordinary, but he did not respond to the words around him, but hurried towards Rodski. Seeing his eagerness, Rodski couldn't help asking, "What's the matter?" Medley walked up to him and whispered what he had observed 30 kilometers away, and also detailed the equipment and elite level of Vasily and his party. After listening to Medley's words, Rodski said to him directly, "You did a good job. Which one of the girls below is your favorite? Choose it yourself." And Medley was not polite either. He directly selected the most beautiful one in the dance and took it away with the girl's frightened screams. As the person with the strongest detection ability under Rodski, he has such confidence. Rodski wasn't mad at his actions at all, just leaning back in his chair and thinking about the gain and loss of the news. The goods that can be guarded by the elite must be of great value, and the force of guarding the elite will make him suffer heavy losses. A dilemma. But now that the singing and dancing stopped, even the leaders were quietly waiting for their leader to think about the problem, and the noisy banquet was silent for a while. In the end, greed overcame reason, and Rodski got up and glanced at the mayor beside him. This action made him understand something. I saw him stand up immediately and said, "I'll leave with someone." After speaking, he immediately left with the girls, who were still shaking but also relieved. These innocent people were temporarily spared. After seeing the unrelated people leaving, Rodski turned to a big man with a face sitting next to his left hand and instructed, "Akelev, you go to Fisk this Cossack bastard immediately. Tell him, there's a big deal, and he'll be divided in half when it's done." Akelev, with a face full of flesh and blood, is his deputy, and this time Rodski is not fully sure. In order to succeed this time, he plans to win over Fisk to do it together. Seeing the serious expression on the leader's face, Akelev nodded and left. After the deputy left, Rodski told the leaders in the hall, 30 kilometers away, someone is secretly transporting a batch of valuable goods by their own force. This time we let them know that they are disrespectful. Our end. Rodski's words caused the leaders to unanimously shout, "Let these people know we are good." Rodski nodded with satisfaction and said, "Recharge our batteries for the past 2 days. After the reply from the old guy Fisk, we will set off and do his mother's vote." Chapter 362 Kazengold 9. Fisk's reply was very fast. In fact, he was also very interested in this ostentatious material transportation team, but his strength was not enough. When Rodski asked the two to cooperate, he certainly had no reason to refuse. As for why they didn't directly attack the cargo entry and exit points at both ends, it was because their storage points were all on boats near the riverbank. Moreover, he was quite vigilant. When something went wrong, he drove away along the river, leaving the two armed leaders who did not have enough ships to do anything. Partnership matters are negotiated quickly, provided there are no conflicting interests and common goals. It only took 3 days to resolve the question of the location of the ambush and the distribution of the spoils. In order to avoid long nights, The two sides decided to act on April 2nd, between Ulis and Virix, which would avoid possible reinforcement on the afternoon before the operation. The town of Maloyev was full of people, and more than 400 ferocious militants gathered here. As their leader, Rodsky was also dressed in military uniform. He rode on his horse, and said to Aklev, who had just returned from Fisk in front of him, "This time I'll take someone out. You have to guard your home. Don't worry, there is no problem with the general. I will add more sentries, and I will carefully check these bastards." Hearing Aklev's promise, Rodsky patted him on the shoulder, and waved to the militants who were waiting for his orders behind him. Set off. More than 400 militants who had been waiting for a long time immediately stepped forward, and followed their leader to the south with the dream of making a fortune. Today they will rest near the road, and recharge for tomorrow's battle. After Rodsky left with the people, Aklev, who was left behind, immediately said to the rest of the people, "All cheer up, fill me with sentries, and wait for the triumphant return of the general." After scolding the people around him, he whispered to a confidant who followed him, "Find me 2 girls here. Damn, I'm tired from running back and forth, so take a rest first." It seemed that Aklev was still a little dissatisfied with not being able to go together. Listening to the dissatisfied confidant in the second master's tone, he said with a smile, "At this time, I'll do it now, and I'll find 2 people who will satisfy you." Facing the dogleg behavior of his subordinates, Aklev nodded and walked back to his residence. After sending Aklev away, the confidant, with great arrogance, casually ordered 2 to accept them. "Come with me, go to work with the harassment of the 3. The town of Maloyev was in chaos again. The tattered residents of the town could only pray in their hearts in the face of this situation. When will these days end?" Rodsky did not walk fast with the people, and did not arrive at an unnamed hill near the road until nearly sunset. The Cossacks led by Fisk had already arrived here. Because of the large number of horses, Fisk, dressed in a traditional Cossack costume, greeted Rodsky in a Russian military uniform. "It's not too late. It's you who came early." The 2 greeted each other, while their subordinates settled down separately. However, through the gap of 300 meters between the 2 new camps, it can be seen that both sides are wary of each other. They are all gathered together temporarily for the sake of profit. Anyone who trusts their backs to the other side is stupid. After a night's rest, nearly 1,000 militants gathered together after breakfast, and began to prepare for the ambush. The diggers dug the pits, and the ones sent out to investigate the situation were sent out to investigate the situation, and only Rodsky and Fisk were commanding their respective teams. Looking down from the sky, I saw that even the 2 sides of the ambush were clearly demarcated, and it seemed that they were guarding against each other. It's just that behind them, not paying attention, a pair of eyes observed their movements. The large action of the nearly 1,000 militants naturally exposed a lot of traces, and John's subordinates who were in charge of the external investigation of the situation would naturally find their abnormal places. Speak slowly, don't be in a hurry. Take a drink first. In front of the convoy, Vasily handed his water bottle to a young man, dressed as a local farmer in front of him. The young man was panting, his clothes were covered with muddy water, and there were some hay shavings on his head. And the horses behind him were also puffing with white air like him, and they seemed to be quite tired. This John's subordinate took the water bottle, and took 2 gulps, and after breathing down, he said directly, 25 kilometers ahead, there are militants of 1,000 people ambushing on the side of the road. According to estimates, there is a high probability it's for your team. The young man's words made the atmosphere of the team become solemn. Feeling the change behind him, Vasily laughed and said, "These Russian thugs also want to rob the team. I think it's courting death. Let me send it for God. They go to hell." Vasily's optimistic words infected others, and the atmosphere became lively. At first, everyone was a little surprised when they heard about 1,000 armed men. Now that Vasily said it, he remembered how many weapons some thugs and defeated soldiers can have. He's right. These thugs are courting death for daring to hit us. Let's send them to hell for God. A few words in a row made everyone's atmosphere high, and Vasily didn't have to look back to know that it was the middle class who was boosting everyone's morale. He asked the young man directly, "Do you know where their ambush is?" The young man was taken aback. by Vasily's question, and immediately replied, I know. Then you take us there. I want to meet these daring guys. After Vasily finished speaking, he grinned at the young man, as if he was going to eat people and beasts. And the young man couldn't help shivering, feeling the weather was a little cold. Virisi turned his head and told him what to do after he left. Roller, take 2 teams to protect the convoy and let them drive slowly so as not to disturb our hunting. Ruler, who was standing next to him, replied with a smile, don't worry, boss, I know what to do. Happy hunting. Vasily patted his deputy on the shoulder. Rowler is the person he is most assured of, and his old friend who has been with him for many years is worthy of his trust. Leave the 2 teams, and the others follow me. After speaking, Vasily got on his horse and said to the young spy, let's detour behind them and give them a surprise. The young man who was infected by the words immediately replied, no problem. Vasily waved his hand. Go hunting. A group of people followed their own heads in full armor to teach this group of daring militants. Chapter 363 Kazengold. End. The fresh green grass and blooming wildflowers attracted many insects such as bees, and there were many human figures under their busy figures. These figures in ambush on the side of the road are the militants united by Rodsky and Fisk. Nearly 1,000 people hid in the gradually growing grass, waiting for the arrival of the fat sheep. As the leaders, Rodsky and Fisk naturally occupy the most favorable positions, but the late arrival of the team made them a little worried. Why hasn't the convoy come yet? Rodsky waved away a bee that was swaying in front of his eyes and asked Medley, who had detected the news, did you find out? In the face of Rodsky's inquiry, Medley quickly replied, yes, every time I arrive here around 11 o'clock, I have observed it several times. Is there something unexpected this time? Without waiting for Rodsky to answer, Fisk said in a loud voice, don't be impatient. Know that it is common for us Cossacks to wait a few days to catch wild horses. If Fisk didn't care, Rodsky could only wait patiently. After a while, a spy who was watching the situation ahead ran back. How about it? The same questioning of the 2 leaders reveals that they are not as calm as they appear. The spy was stunned for a moment when the 2 leaders asked at the same time, and immediately replied, the convoy is 10 miles ahead, and the speed is not fast. It seems that there is a problem with the car, and they are preparing to repair it. The spy's words made the 2 of them stunned for a moment, which was an unexpected situation. Leaving the ambush and going over, or waiting for the convoy to come, becomes a question for the 2 leaders to consider. After a long time, Fisk, the leader of the Cossacks, expressed his opinion. Let's wait for the team to come. Our team is too conspicuous. If it is discovered in advance, it will be troublesome. Rodsky thought about it and agreed. Alright. Then he instructed the people behind him, let everyone be careful, the convoy is coming. Don't be discovered. When the 2 leaders each ordered their subordinates to be more concealed, they had no idea that their actions were being watched. In a sparse hilltop grove 600 or 700 meters away, Vasily put down his telescope and slowly backed away. Behind the mountain were guards in their early 100s, but now they were fully armed and planned to surprise these thugs. Vasily stepped back and asked in a low voice, haven't the people around to investigate the situation come back? 3 have come back, and no other finds. Only 1 has not come back. Who is it? It's Wald, 3 kilometers west of the woods. Just as he was talking, someone stepped forward and whispered, Wald is back. Vasily said at once, let him come. Some of the panting Wald was taken directly in front of Vasily. Wald, did you find anything? Wald, who looked good, replied, yes, boss, as expected. There are 2 temporary camps very close to each other behind the woods. There are only a dozen people guarding each, and there are some horses and a small amount of living supplies. Very well, you did a good job. After Vasily praised Wald, he immediately ordered, later, you will take a team of people to take down these 2 camps, to drive away the horses, burn their camps to create chaos, and distract these militants. Wald nodded and replied, no problem, leave it to me. Vasily continued, next on our side, Morris, you are in charge of the artillery, and let the artillery fire immediately after hearing the gunshots. Having fired hundreds of shells, Morris, who is proficient in the operation of the slap gun, nodded and replied, leave it to me. Vasily went on to talk about the battle plan. Willis, you are in charge of the 2 heavy machine guns we brought. You can't let the enemy show signs of counterattack, understand? Fully understand. Vasily then said to his subordinates, everyone else is prepared with me. Let the sniper be responsible for destroying the enemy's firepower and command, and the others are responsible for destroying them. Do you understand? Clear. Clear. After all the subordinates answered, Vasily held out the left hand of the watch he was wearing. Right, it's 11:12. In 5 minutes, we'll attack. After nearly 5 minutes of waiting, Rodsky and Fisk were still eagerly awaiting the arrival of their dream convoy, completely unaware that there were several sniper rifles aimed at them behind them. Rodsky felt a tingling in his nostrils now. Wedge. Crack, crack, crack. A sneeze kept Rodsky from death's harvest. Several gunshots sounded, and Rodsky immediately realized that it was not good. As expected of an officer who has been on the battlefield for several years, he realized that the attack was coming from behind through the sound of gunfire. Several standard tumbling moves in succession hide to the other side and lie on the ground. This made the sniper who aimed at him cursed and had no choice but to choose other targets. Fisk, who fell to the ground, was only a few meters away from Rodsky, but his already dull eyes seemed to be still confused about who had attacked him. The sound of gunshots made the armed gangs in ambush realize that I had been attacked. However, many of the leaders lost their lives in the first round of gunfire, which made them slow to respond to the attack and didn't know what to do. Some people even thought they had never experienced such a scene and were stunned. Over there. Fight back. A leader who was not afraid of death loudly ordered his subordinates to launch a counterattack in the direction of the grove, but their firepower was worrying, and their marksmanship was poor, and this eye-catching action made him the focus on the battlefield, where the focus usually doesn't last long. And he is no exception. After several shots were fired, the leader fell to the ground with flying blood, and his scattered eyes told him the truth. Of course, a small amount of rifle shooting did not frighten the gathered bandits, and many daring thugs planned to let their attackers know how bad it was. Boom, boom, da da da. However, the sound of the next few mortars made their movements hesitant, and the sound of machine guns made them even more afraid. The chorus of 2 heavy machine guns and 10 Madsen light machine guns let them know what a hail of bullets is. A large number of militants fell in pieces like wheat. This frightened many robbers. They had never seen such a scene before. They could only lie on the ground and shiver. Their weak legs were dominated by fear, so they could not escape from here. They could only lie here, as if they were frightened. Like an ostrich. Seeing the scene in front of him, Vasily realized that this was an opportunity. The enemy was stunned and couldn't give them the opportunity to react, and immediately waved to attack. Dozens of heroic Romanian elites attacked 10 times as many enemies. Hundreds of militants immediately caused a commotion after seeing the enemy attack. However, many people still opened fire on the attacking Vasily and his party, trying to recover their accomplices. Although most of their marksmanship was not very good, people were still shot from time to time, and Vasily felt anxious when he saw the enemy slowly recovering. Didn't Wald, who raided the enemy camp, set fire to the enemy camp? And Morris, who was in charge of shelling, saw that the situation ahead was not good and immediately let the 2 mortars fire rapidly, trying to use the maximum firepower to dispel the enemy's will to resist. Boom, boom, boom. The successive explosions fell on the enemy's head, causing his morale to drop immediately. The violent shelling of the sneak attackers caused many militants to misjudge the situation, thinking that they had encountered the army's clearing and suppression, and they began to aim around and plan to choose a retreat in advance. At this time, as the only surviving leader, Rodsky has also retreated to a slightly safer place. Through his rich battlefield experience, he realized that this is just a small elite force. Maybe it is to protect those materials. Thinking of these capable soldiers who have cost him a lot, the goods he robbed this time must be very important and valuable. Thinking of this, his greed is even heavier. As long as he takes down this batch of goods, whether he recruits troops or goes to serve others, then there will be other ways out. So at this moment, he went out and gave himself up to the bandits. Don't be afraid, there are few of them. It's up to us to stand up. It's them who can't stand it. Don't be afraid. Fight back. Under Rodsky's instigation, many bandits with different thoughts gradually calmed down and began to resist them seriously. The pressure on Vasily and others was even greater, and even the offensive could not be launched, and they could only shoot at the enemy. Although their marksmanship is much better than their opponents, the huge difference in numbers makes them unable to drag point at this moment. A thick black smoke rose from the west point. Seeing this black smoke, many gangsters became agitated. They all knew that this was their previous camp, and the signs were that they were being burned, and they still had a lot of things. Their point, of course, the people who reacted the most to this smoke were Fisk's men, who were Cossack nomadic groups. The horses are like their own companions, and without these horses they will lose not only a fortune, but the very foundation of their footing. So after the camp was burned, they had the biggest reaction point. After seeing the thick smoke causing different reactions from the enemy, Vasily immediately ordered, aim for the less turbulent, focus on the right point. Fisk's gang immediately felt a lot less pressure, and it was not a fool to be the deputy who took over the position after Fisk's death. After feeling the difference, I immediately thought for a while and said, we withdraw. The opponents are too strong. If we want to take them down, we have to lose at least half of our manpower. We can't take risks at this time. Point, of course, the adventure he was talking about came not only from the attackers, but also from Rodsky. As a leader who has just died, and the number of people is still smaller than that, there are many dangers of being annexed, and ensuring their own survival is the first priority. Point, the withdrawal of the Cossacks made Radziski jump in rage. This is not just a matter of losing 2/5 of his troops, but also shaking the confidence of his own men. Watching others evacuate, who is still in the mood to continue fighting. Point, seeing that his plan was working, Vasily struck the iron with the heat. Just hit the person on the right, and put all the firepower on it. Point. So the blows were all borne by Rodsky's people, and the difference in numbers was not that big, and the offensive of Vasily and others started again. Point, in the fierce attack of Vasily and others, Rodsky's men could not resist, and retreat. Point, at this time, Rodsky also knew that the collapse was in front of him, and he didn't inform others. He quietly chose a direction and slipped away. It wasn't until his subordinates couldn't stop it, and came to him to find a way to find that no one was there. Point, the leaders have all slipped away, and the collapse is just around the corner. The gangsters who fled in all directions were everywhere, and Vasily hurriedly ordered his subordinates, immediately bring 5 groups of people on horses to chase. The main purpose is to break up the possibility of them gathering again. Point, the subordinate with a trace of blood on his face replied immediately, understood. I'll go right away. Point, seeing more than 40 subordinates riding horses and chasing in the direction where the bandits fled, Vasily called a subordinate and said, let ruler bring the convoy over. It's safe now. Point, there was still half a sentence left unspoken in Vasily. It was only temporary safety. This time, the battle with guns and guns is expected to spread to the city of Tsaritsyn soon, so the General Denikin, who is reorganizing the army, will definitely send someone to investigate, and there is not much time left for them. Next, I need to quickly transport the gold to Verix to board the ship. Point, and this battle cost him more than a dozen brothers, which made Vasily very resentful for Rodsky, who escaped. If it weren't for his mission, he would want to chase and kill this fast moving guy. Point, in fact, after returning to Urus that afternoon, Vasily immediately informed Christo about it. Point, Christo, who knew the seriousness of the matter, immediately arranged to transfer gold overnight without changing cars, and the carriages formed a convoy to transfer. Anyway, there is no threat to their armed forces for the time being. Point, after 3 days of uninterrupted transshipment, the small remaining batch of gold was safely transferred and docked on the secret transport ship of Virix. Point, looking at these gold nuggets engraved in Russian, Christo and the others finally breathed a long sigh of relief. Among them, Vasily, who was in charge of the escort operation, had raised his panda eyes. It seems that the escort task during this period of rushing fortune has made this hard-working man a little bit overwhelmed. Point, as their means of transportation, there are less than 3 cars that can still be driven, and more than 30 horses are exhausted. But it's all worth it in the face of the gold safely transferred to the ship. Point, when Christo and others got on the boat and started the last part of the journey, Colonel Dovnov of the White Russian Army, who came to investigate under the order of Denikin, also brought his cavalry brigade to Vasily, others and Luo where the discs fought. Point, Rodsky, you mean to fight the guards here? Colonel Dovnov pointed to the battlefield, where metal bullet casings were exposed from time to time after only simple cleaning, and asked Rodsky, who was wearing a major's uniform beside him. It seems that the leader took refuge in Denikin, and also sold the information of Vasily and others. Yes, Your Excellency. I was working with 500 people and a group of Cossacks, intending to ambush them. It was here that they were attacked by the other side, and they were defeated. Only about 100 people. Yes, Your Excellency Colonel. We had already inquired about it at the time. There is a ship in each of Urus and Virex, and they should be transshipping some cargo. I wanted to intercept a fat sheep, but it was a beast. While the two were exploring the battlefield, a warhorse ran over with a messenger. I saw the messenger jumped off his horse and ran in front of Colonel Dovnov and said, "Report to the brigade commander." Colonel Miladorf did not find this group of people and goods in Urus. After investigation, they left the day before yesterday. The words of the messenger made Colonel Dovnov frown. Understood. Let's go down. When Rodsky saw that he couldn't find anyone, he felt a little bad. Before he could speak, another messenger rushed in front of them. Brigade Commander, Vilix did not find this group of people and goods, nor did he have a boat. After inquiring about the fishermen nearby, it was a steam engine boat, and it left yesterday morning. When Colonel Dovnov heard the news, his face was very ugly. I drove away yesterday morning. Yesterday morning. Damn it. According to the speed of the ship, it's already in the Black Sea. Where can I find it? Damn it. Regardless of Colonel Dovnov's complaints, the ship carrying the gold had reached the Black Sea. As the only warship that the Romanian Navy had taken, the Coburg-class cruiser Count Dazzler appeared in front of them. It seems that, in order to protect this batch of gold, all means have been used. Even this Navy housekeeper dared to come to Russia's coastal waters to meet up. This also reassured Virix and the others. This time, most of the mission has been completed. They only need to return to Constanta to enjoy enough honors. Of course, this must be kept secret. On the ship, Shirka looked at Donovsky, who was staying with his family next to him, and said with a smile, "Don't worry, we in Romania are trustworthy. It is necessary to promise you." Facing Shilka's words, Donovsky, who accompanied him the whole time, could only helplessly smile. God knows these lunatics actually succeeded, but the world is too beautiful to think that there are 5 tons of their own. Chapter 364 The Unsung Hero. Very good. Well done. In the vault under the Reserve Bank of Bucharest, Edel looked at the gold engraved with Russian in front of him, and praised Milik and Kalis who were following him. This group of gold in Kazan was escorted by Christo, Shirka, Verisi and others for nearly half a month, and finally arrived in Romania safely. After their ship arrived at Constanta, the guards sent a regiment to be responsible for its safety, and it was also in full control of the route arrangement, not allowing it to take a step out of sight. The mission will not be complete until it has been fully shipped to the Reserve Bank's underground vault. As for the safety of the Reserve Bank, that's not an issue at all. There are multiple protections in the bank, and the gate of the underground vault alone has 3 layers, all of which are made of metal. In addition, the Reserve Bank does not open its business to the public. And there is a military camp 100 meters next to it, and there is a regiment of guards stationed here. There are also alarms in the bank directly connected to the military camp. If there is a situation, a fully armed army will appear in the bank within 3 minutes. Unless the enemy hits Bucharest, it is absolutely impossible to transport it away. Listening to the king's praise, Miluk, who was mainly in charge of the specific work, said cautiously, "This is not just the ability of our intelligence department to rely on our intelligence, but also the result of the efforts of the entire kingdom." Facing Miluk's modest words, Edel did not reply. He looked back and said, "Among them, the ability of your intelligence department is the key to this operation, so you don't need to be humble. It's your credit. People can take away, and this is the best reward for those who sacrificed for Romania." Why Edel would say such a thing? That's because the captain of the guard handed him the list of intelligence personnel who died in this operation. This touched Edel a lot. Even though this operation went so smoothly, it actually depended on the cooperation of many departments. to complete it point as the main body of the intelligence department. In order to ensure this operation over the years, the basic information of each route is as big as 3 or 4 file boxes, not to mention the infiltration and official bribes of various places, as well as the setting of the site and so on. These are the hard work of the frontline intelligence officers who are unknown, and hard-working point for this batch of gold reserves, which have greatly contributed to Romania's development. The list of victims alone has several pages. Many of them were caused by natural and man-made disasters, and only a few were discovered and destroyed. For example, the Black Wolf Barlow Pike, that Edel saw on the list. This is a veteran intelligence officer who has performed many missions, and has good reviews. After being sent to Russia in 1913 as the head of an intelligence station, he was killed by gangsters in March 1916. The reason is very simple. As his disguised identity, he was a small grain merchant, and the gangster killed this excellent intelligence officer for more than 10 tons of rubles. Of course, Baroque is not alone. For example, the Red Fox Laria, Turtle Doveshawk, and Black Panther Natalie on the list have all encountered various accidents. Therefore, the intelligence personnel sent out are not as beautiful as everyone thinks. Many of them have to face various environments that they do not like at all. As for the executioners who killed their friends and colleagues, they are completely laughing and talking. In order to obtain information, various means are used, and the sacrifices made are also very large. As for the latent success, it has become basic common sense to fully integrate into the identity, just like the transformation of Fredericia from a student to a nobleman, and then to a shipyard skilled worker, all of which are his basic skills. And Edel also learned about the hardships and difficulties of intelligence personnel through this listan. Karest's remarks. It is not at all like the car beauty, personable, or agile and all kinds of high-tech blessings that are learned about in the film and television of the previous life. And these are basically to satisfy the public's various fantasies about the intelligence department. The real situation may be lurking in the local area for several years or even a lifetime. Almost forgot about his own family or friends, and could only live silently in the hidden local area, waiting for the call of the organization. Even the sacrifice is basically unknown, and it is not even recognized by the motherland. And they can maintain this kind of two-faced life entirely by virtue of their love and dedication to the motherland. Of course, as their superiors, Milok or Karest and others are also very concerned about these frontline intelligence personnel, and they have given various help to their families and intelligence personnel. For example, let them see the letters of their family members, and sometimes secretly organize them to get together, to get in touch with each other, so that they can feel the care of the organization. However, as an intelligence agency, there is not only warmth, but also a keen cold wind. The intelligence officers of the mutinous organization have also carried out many pursuits. After all, people have various ideas, and many ideas are dangerous. These techniques also allow them to understand the dangers of intelligence personnel, allowing them to make choices with more concern. Of course, these are all last resorts, and more still require their personal integrity and perseverance. Therefore, in the selection of intelligence personnel, the requirements for all aspects have always been very strict. It's not just for countries and organizations, it's for them too. And Romania's rapid development is not only due to Edel's foresight, but also the support of Romania from all aspects. His role is only to make it less dangerous, and it cannot directly replace its progress. As the eyes and ears of the kingdom, the intelligence department is of course very important. Edel is also very clear about this, so he brought Milok and Karest with him when he inspected the results, which was an affirmation of their achievements. Of course, in addition to spiritual encouragement, material must also be rewarded, but half of these rewards are given to the middle and lower classes. And for those who have reached the ranks of Karest and Milok, the affirmation from the king is the greatest reward. Edel continued to look at the gold and asked, "You can make a list of the rewards for this operation, and I will give them to those who have lived and died for the kingdom." As the main person in charge, Milok, who had some grey hair, replied, "Okay, your majesty, I'll make a copy when I go back." Looking at Milok's grey hair, Edel sighed and said, "I'm very satisfied with your work, Milok, just don't work too hard." In the face of the king's concern, Milok still said in his expressive tone, This is all for the kingdom, and the current situation in Europe makes our intelligence department not slack in the slightest point. Milik's words reminded Edel of the current battle situation, and he couldn't help but sigh. Yeah, it's too important for Romania right now to be real. But Milik, you need to pay attention to your body. You are the most capable intelligence manager in our country. If you are exhausted, I can't find anyone to take over. In the face of Edel's teasing words, Milik also replied, I will pay attention, Your Majesty. I won't let Romania be suppressed by others in intelligence. The conversation between Edel and Milik did not make Karist feel any waves at all. He was the most senior guard and knew his strengths and weaknesses. As the most trusted person around the king, this is his advantage. However, in terms of intelligence work, he is really not as good as Milik. After all, this is not his major. By the way, what happened to Donovsky, who walked away with 5 tons of gold? We have exchanged him for checks and national debt of the same value, and he has left Romania with these. As a smart man, I believe he will take this secret into the coffin. At this time, Donovsky, who was in high spirits on a cruise ship, sneezed suddenly. Helping the wife next to him asked with concern, Dear, what's the matter? Looking at the Mediterranean Sea, Donovsky felt a warm Dead Sea breeze and replied to his wife, It's okay, but suddenly my nose feels a little itchy. PS. Sorry, the chapter name of the previous chapter is wrong. It should be chapter 347. I blame myself for not reading it carefully. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365, Competition for Funds. 1. After inspecting the results of the operation, Edel returned to the palace. As for Milik and Karist, naturally they need to do their jobs. There are still many finishing touches to this gold operation that they need to deal with, and the current situation in Europe also needs attention, and they are busy with all these. However, shortly after Edel returned to the palace, a guard came to report, and the Prime Minister asked the Minister of Finance to be summoned. After hearing the news, Edel smiled. It must be for this windfall. This is also understandable. After all, Romania was rich before, and it accumulated a lot of wealth by neutrality in the early stage of the war, which basically made up for the many debts it owed for industrial development. For example, the investment in higher education, the construction of primary medical facilities, the improvement of transportation, and so on. These are all beasts that swallow gold, no matter how much investment they can swallow. And when Romania was ready to go to war, it only had a balance of 1.6 billion lei, a little over $300 million. Financially, this is still the result of Edel's early greeting, otherwise there is not much left. Of course, as the head of the government, Prime Minister Brătianu also knew the importance of this war to Romania, so the government was very supportive of the kingdom's participation in the war. But as the war began, the money slipped away from the government like a tide. The purchase of weapons and ammunition, the pension of the army, the restoration and construction of newly seized territories, etc., all make the funds in the hands of the government feel completely insufficient. The most important thing is to support Romanian industry, which also costs a lot of money. Because of the rapid change in Romania's diplomatic attitude, from being close to the Allies to being neutral and then declaring war, a large number of companies engaged in exporting to the Allies suffered a lot. The losses of these affiliated enterprises account for 70% of the total number of enterprises in Romania. This also shows how much Romania, a country with close economic ties to the Allies, suffered in order to join the Allied camp. Although the Allied countries gave Romania some economic compensation and preferential policies, how many benefits can Britain and France, which depended on American loans, give? And the United States, which is not under urgent pressure, is also mainly material-based aid to Romania. This makes the large and small companies accustomed to eating alone in the Allied camp have limited benefits in the face of fiercely competitive markets such as Britain and France. Fortunately, the current Romanian participation in the war has eased this downward pressure on the economy. A large number of labors have been incorporated into the huge machine of war, so that these enterprises can rely on the war to survive for some time. On the other hand, the government can selectively support this situation, and enterprises with technology and ability can develop and grow, which can make Romania as short as possible the post-war depression period. So after Edel inspected the gold, Prime Minister Bricianu immediately came to the door with the Minister of Finance. It's all a word, money makes trouble. So within a few minutes, Edel met Prime Minister Bricianu in his office, and Lord Albert, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who accompanied him. The Lord Albert took over in 1916, the old Chancellor who had retired due to illness, and his experience is also very inspirational. His father was a famous banker in Romania at the time, and he showed extraordinary financial ability since he was a child. But Albert's life changed dramatically when his father went bankrupt because of a financial fraud case. The rich and elegant life was far away from him, and he had to drop out of school to work as a helper because of the dilemma of life. However, this could not dispel his thirst for knowledge. He helped others to study by himself and be admitted to university. Among them, his hard work for study allowed him to get financial support from the family who worked. And after he finished college, he first worked as a clerk in a bank until he became the branch president. Then he was introduced to the Ministry of Finance because of his outstanding performance, and then began his career in the Ministry of Finance for nearly 2 decades. Through his own efforts, he successively served as Director of the Budget Division of the Ministry of Finance, Assistant Minister of the Exchequer, and Director of the Financial Division. Among them, he is in charge of the establishment of the Reserve Bank. It can be said that the financial aspects are not clear to him. You too. What's the matter with you this time? In his office, Edel leaned back on the chair and asked the two important ministers with a smile. In the face of the king's inquiry, Prime Minister Bricianu first took out a document from himself and handed it to Edel. Your Majesty, this is the report prepared for the reconstruction of northern Moldavia. Edel took over the document. He knew about the reconstruction of the northern part of Moldavia. Regarding this matter, it all needs to start from the recovery of Croatia as a territory occupied by the Germans. The fall of several cities and vast rural areas in northern Moldavia caused Romania to lose a lot. And because it was captured, it also caused a large-scale war refugee wave in Romania. More than 200,000 people who were unwilling to be harassed by the war rushed to the rear with their families, dispersing the fleeing people, maintaining order, and providing relief materials put a lot of pressure on the government. Now as the old general led the Moldavian army to regain lost ground one after another. Mainly, the German army retreated to occupy the majority in the face of the return of the main Romanian main force, and the allied troops reinforced after the defeat of Bulgaria, then for this piece of land by Germany. Reconstruction of occupied territories is also on the agenda. In terms of the city, Suceava, which was basically destroyed by the war, needs to be rebuilt. The two cities of Homan and Iasi, where no fierce battle broke out, were also severely harmed by the German army. Even the city of Bacău has many buildings damaged by German artillery. In the countryside, the Germans, who were seriously short of food, could not let it go. Countless villages were forcibly expropriated and taken away their food. In the face of heavily armed soldiers, a large number of villagers who were reluctant to give up their property or unable to leave, had to obediently hand over their food reserves. However, these robbers dressed in the army had some conscience, and they did not levy the rations of the villagers. Watching the German army's grain harvesting team leaving with a full load, the villagers could only look at the German marks they were given and wanted to cry without tears before the German army planned to withdraw. Many rural grains that were about to mature were also forced by the villagers to harvest and transport them away in advance. And this phenomenon also reflects the degree of domestic food shortage in Germany. At the same time, the relief supplies of the Romanian government have also increased a lot. All of these add up to Romania's loss of about 800 million lei, and the current government can only provide it with material assistance of about 50 million lei. So, when the Prime Minister took out this document, Edel glanced at it a little and signed the word agree. Chapter 366, Competition for Funds, Part 2. After seeing Edel processing the documents on the reconstruction of northern Moldavia, Prime Minister Bricianu immediately pretended to be concerned and asked, Your Majesty, what should we do with this batch of gold? As soon as Edel heard that the meat scene was coming, He also pretended to be confused and said, "Put it in the reserve bank first, and talk about it after the war is over." After hearing that, Edel planned to wait until the end of the war to consider the use of this batch of gold. Prime Minister Bricianu stopped putting it on. "Your Majesty, at present, due to the procurement of war materials, to appease the people in the newly occupied territories, and the resettlement of the people returning home from North Moldavia, the government has almost run out of funds. We must obtain new funds to continue. Go down, so you can see if you can allocate a part of it and solve the current difficulties." First point facing the request of Prime Minister Bricianu, Edel was a little silent. In fact, he had his own ideas about this batch of gold. In Edel's view, the current gold from Kazan is not the best time to use it. After World War I, the appeasement of Romania's newly occupied territories and the acquisition of German industry were the most valuable moments. Think of the huge debt that Germany was carrying after the war, and the repressed environment. With a large pool of experienced technicians and absurdly cheap factories, Edel felt it was his responsibility to keep them and these factories alive on Romanian soil. This is also the greatest contribution he can make to these poor German people as a member of the Hohenzollern family. Point as for the anxious people who are about to be incorporated into Romania, Edel also believes that it is necessary to make them feel that the new kingdom attaches great importance to them, so it is also necessary to give some economic benefits. However, both of them require huge amounts of money, and the current batch of gold is the biggest capital he intends to do these two things. Therefore, Edel was a little reluctant to the Prime Minister's suggestion to use this batch of gold. Prime Minister Bricianu saw that the king was calm about his proposal and said impatiently, "Your Majesty, there are too many materials that need to be purchased at present. Our government's finances are quite tight, and we really need a fund to alleviate this situation." In the face of the Prime Minister's words, Edel asked instead, "Can't the government issue another national debt to ease it?" In the face of the king's scruples, Prime Minister Bricianu couldn't help but smile bitterly. Does the king think that they have not considered this method? In fact, the government has already made this idea, but unfortunately it is not realistic. At present, the domestic capital is not strong enough, and many entrepreneurs have grievances about the kingdom joining the treaty camp, and they will not be active in purchasing. Whoever makes a big profit and may lose money has grievances. This has nothing to do with the issue of love or not patriotism. Capital is profit seeking. Moreover, these enterprises are basically relying on the war money they have made in the past few years, and many people who make money have invested it in expanding production. So it is impossible to expect the country to digest this batch of national debt. So the Prime Minister said bluntly, "Your Majesty, at present, it is difficult for the domestic economy to bear the issuance of this national debt. This is not a small sum of money, but a war bond of nearly 2 billion lei." Hearing the Prime Minister's words, Edel was also taken aback. So much money, how is it calculated? Seeing that the king did not believe it, the Prime Minister immediately stated his reasons. This batch of money includes the cost of continuing to purchase war materials, as well as pensions for the fallen soldiers, and resettlement fees for the disabled soldiers. You must know that the current staff, the reported number of dead soldiers and disabled veterans has reached more than 70,000, all of which require large sums of money. Edel knew this. He was also taken aback when the present newspaper came up. Because Romania suffered some losses when facing the German army in North Moldavia, the other fronts were considered smooth. Why the casualties were so large. When Pirazan explained to the king, he realized that, although the situation was favorable for Romania, the number of casualties was really not small. First of all, in the Battle of Transylvania, Romania lost more than 40,000 casualties and missing. Among them, there were more than 25,000 soldiers who could no longer fight after death and medical treatment. The Bulgarian campaign had the smallest number of casualties in Romania, with more than 24,000 casualties and missing persons, and more than 11,000 soldiers who died or could not continue fighting. As for the Battle of Northern Moldavia, where the Romanian army suffered the most casualties, there were more than 80,000 casualties and missing persons, of which more than 45,000 people died and retired due to injuries and illnesses according to the Romanian standard of 6,000 lei killed. and 5,000 to 3,000 disabled soldiers. This means that more than 300 million lei is needed. The money can't be delayed yet. It's a big deal about the morale of the army. Therefore, Prime Minister Bricianu was also in a hurry and had no choice but to come up with the idea of this windfall point. Although the Prime Minister had good reasons, Edel was still a little unwilling, so he suggested another waypoint. The government could go to London or New York to issue war bonds in the face of the advice given by the king. Prime Minister Bricianu said directly, "Your Majesty, we have considered it, and this will not fill the funding gap." Seeing that the king was a little unconvinced, the Prime Minister gave reasons. At present, the national debts of Britain and France are not well sold in the financial markets of London and Paris, while in the United States, we have contacted banks such as Morgan and Citi. They said that my country's war bonds can only be underwritten for a $100 million issuance, and the interest must be 1 percentage point higher than that of the British and French bonds. Because the American people have concerns about our country's ability to repay. Hearing the Prime Minister's merciless words, Edel sighed secretly. This is because the development time is too short, and Romania is not well known in the world. However, this has been much better. According to the historical situation of Romania, it is estimated that $50 million is enough, and it is estimated that Britain and France will need to protect it. Hearing the Prime Minister's explanation, Edel thought about it. Well, the issue of war bonds is still going on. They will issue $100 million of war bonds in the United States according to their requirements, and then also issue 500 million lei of war bonds at home and in Britain and France. For the remaining 1 billion shortfall, take part of it. Backed by gold, $1 billion lei was issued to finance the war. After Edel finished speaking, he looked at the Chancellor of the Exchequer who was standing behind the Prime Minister. Lord Albert, who has worked in the Ministry of Finance for many years, immediately understood the king's intention. He stepped forward and asked, "Your Majesty, what proportion of gold is this note issued in?" The meaning of Lord Albert's words was understood by everyone present. Although it is now on the gold standard, it is not the classical gold standard, with 100 million lei in gold and 100 million in paper money. Now which country is not overissued banknotes? Although banknotes can still be exchanged for gold, its complicated procedures have blocked a large number of ordinary people, and the exchange of banknotes for gold between countries also needs to consider all aspects. If you don't believe it, after the original time and space war, the debts owed by Britain and France have long been insufficient to repay their domestic gold reserves. As the main creditor, the United States still does not dare to force them to pay them back, and can only negotiate the exchange of interests. Romania doesn't have that capability, so Edel thought about it and said, "Let's release it on a 3-2-1 basis." After he finished speaking, Edel sighed secretly. This batch of gold has only arrived in Romania, which is 1/10 less. Who can stand it more than once? When the Prime Minister saw that he had received the money, he quickly left the palace with the Chancellor of the Exchequer. The government's work was very busy, and if it wasn't for this important matter, he wouldn't be too lazy to come over and haggle with the king. After the Prime Minister left, Edel had not waited for a rest, and the guards came in again to report. Chief of the General Staff Ploiesti is coming. Chapter 367 New Battle Plan. My Chief of Staff, you won't come to ask for more money for the war. Admiral Priest just stepped through the door when he heard Edel's words. This made him stunned for a moment, but he reacted immediately and replied, "Your Majesty, if you can ask the government to allocate more funds to us, of course I'm very happy." Edel heard the words of the Chief of the General Staff and said with a smile, "This is unlikely." Preshan thought of the Prime Minister Bricianu and the Minister of Finance he met on the road, and he understood a little. Mostly the Prime Minister beat the autumn wind from the king, which made the king feel a little resentful. He also knew something, and heard that the intelligence services had made a fortune from Russia. With the Prime Minister's character, it would be strange not to come to play the autumn wind. Recently, there has been some rumors in the government, and the Prime Minister is almost unable to sleep because of the funding issue. But that doesn't matter to him. At present, he is already busy enough with the war, and he has no time to care about the government's problems. This is the Prime Minister's job point. Hearing that it wasn't about money, Edel calmed down and asked, "What's the matter this time?" In the face of the king's question, Admiral Pilishin replied, "It's about preparing for the Hungarian campaign." Prezhan was a little afraid that Edel would not understand and continued to explain, "At present, we have driven the Allied troops out of the country, and now the Allied countries require us to continue to attack the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And this also meets our needs. So I will prepare this battle plan." After finishing speaking, Prezhan took out a document from his body and put it in front of Edel. Edel also knew what Admiral Pilishin said. The main reason for this was the last wave of offensives made by Germany and Austria in order to avoid the defeat of the war in January of this year, 2 months earlier than the original history. This is because the Soviet Union signed a peace treaty with Germany and Austria earlier. Germany was mobilizing the elites from the east to the west, planning to make the last wave's efforts. And because of this, Austria-Hungary launched a new wave of offensive that did not exist in the original time and space. Among them, the Austro-Hungarian army, under the planning of its Emperor Karol I, launched an attack on Italy with an advantage of 800,000 troops. It successively won the Piave River, Udine and other places, and its front has been hit in Venice Point. In order to preserve this important city, the British, French and Italian fleets broke through the minefields laid by the Adriatic Navy in the Adriatic Sea at the cost of the loss of 5 cruisers and 3 former dreadnoughts. The Austro-Hungarian Navy, in the face of the Allied combined fleet, which had an absolute advantage, did not dare to leave the port to intercept it. As for the army, in the face of the desperate struggle of the Austro-Hungarian army, Britain and France urgently reinforced 8 divisions to Italy, and the Italian army is also rare to show the bleeding side, concentrated most of the domestic troops in this battle with Austria-Hungary. In the end, facing the combination of land and sea, Austria-Hungary failed to capture the water city of Venice Point, and the spring offensive launched by the Germans was planned by Ludendorff in January. Using the infiltrating assault tactics that had flourished on the Eastern Front, they attacked the defending British forces along the Somme. Its main purpose is still to seize the French capital Paris, to force its surrender. In fact, Germany's attack on Britain and France had been prepared for a long time, but the use of its new tactics was unexpected. During the 3-month spring offensive, shorter than in history, Britain and France were pushed by the German army 60 kilometers at the cost of more than 200,000 casualties, and finally prevented the German army from fulfilling its strategic purpose. In countering DAO's desperate struggles one after another, Britain, France, and Italy desperately wanted to put pressure on DAO. On the Western Front, 300,000 American troops have arrived in France, and 60,000 people can be transported from the country to France every month. Because the losses of Britain and France are greater than in history, the United States has accelerated the transportation of troops, which is 10,000 more than in history. After negotiating between France and Washington, these American soldiers were directly arranged to feel the breath of war on the front line, and they will also participate in the next counterattack against Germany. As for Austria-Hungary, due to the heavy casualties of the Italians, the counterattack against Austria-Hungary can only be found in other directions. Romania, who has been doing well so far, is their target. Therefore, after Admiral Courtois regained lost ground, the Allies immediately asked Romania to launch an offensive against Austria-Hungary to contain its forces. The requirements of the Allied powers are also in line with Romania's next operational goals, as well as Edel's goals, and he has no reason to disagree. In his view, the most insecure territory promised to Romania after World War I was from the Transylvanian border to the Tisza River in the original time and space. It may be to compensate Romania for being beaten too badly by the Allies, or to guard against the Soviet Union. So the Allied powers assigned Bihar and Timis in this territory to Romania. In this time and space, Romania participated in the war for a short time, plus it made a lot of war money, and most importantly, it was much stronger than in history. It is no longer necessary to supplement the strength too much, and it can serve the purpose of blocking the penetration of Soviet Russia. Therefore, Edel believes that to avoid nightmares, it is necessary to win this area first in the war. This can also leave enough room for Romania to operate Whether it is for the referendum to be hidden in the future, or to make things difficult for others on the issue of dividing the spoils, it is necessary to lay a solid foundation in advance. Moreover, there are too many Hungarians in this area. If they do not take advantage of the war to expel some of them, it will inevitably leave right and wrong, or hidden dangers in the future. In Eda's view, Romania, which had acquired new territories after the war, would become a multi-ethnic country. In addition to Romanians, there will also be Poles, Ukrainians, Germans, Hungarians, Bulgarians and so on. Among them, the Hungarians who stayed in Romania will become an intractable hidden danger due to historical reasons. As for the Poles, Eda intends to discuss with the future Polish government to bring back his people who are willing to live in Poland. It is believed that with the Poles' identification with the new country, there will be a large number of people living in this country. And the Ukrainians are not so lucky. This nation awakens the nation that has been suppressed and then continues to be suppressed. Moreover, Eda has already considered a strategy to divide them, first adding sand to the area and moving many Romanians to the past, then increase the tax in the area a lot, and then give some relief to the number of Romanian words learned, so that these Ukrainians can consciously develop the habit of learning Romanian. And its newspaper broadcasts will greatly increase the use of Romanian language and Latin. As for the children's better handling, educational textbooks must also use a current Romanian Latin, and the spoken language must also be learned from Romanian. After 2 or 3 generations, these people will be assimilated. As for unbearable, they can go to the great Soviet Russia to feel it, and they will immediately feel Edel's kindness. At least it didn't let them starve to death. Whether they stick to tradition or choose bread, they will make a sensible decision. It all depends on Edel's previous life experience, which gave him a lot of inspiration. As for the possibility of resistance, Edel is not afraid, as long as he does not get the support of external powers. The Soviet Union would not lift its stone and even smash its own feet, and Britain and France would not do such a stupid thing, even if they needed Romania to watch over the Soviet Union. As for the Bulgarians, it is not a problem at the moment. The sweetness of the economy has overwhelmed those who are still in Romania. Let them go back to Bulgaria, where they are now suffering, and these people do not want to. As for the small number of Germans, it's not a problem at all. As for many territories still in the hands of DOE and Austria or their puppet governments, this is not a problem at all. As long as Germany and Austria are defeated, the 2 puppet governments will take these territories from them and make an armed march. If they dare to resist, let them know the strength of the army of hundreds of thousands who have been tempered by war. This is Darwinism. Big fish eat small fish eat shrimp. Knowing this, Eda now needs to do his part to defeat Austria-Hungary. He picked up Cletion's battle plan and looked at it. This was to use the Transylvanian army as the main body, and then add several standing divisions from the Moldavian army to supplement it. In addition, several technical arms such as heavy artillery regiments and flying wings will be given to enhance their combat capabilities. Eda also saw Hoffman's armored brigade being dispatched to the army. It seems that Preußen intends to test its power on the flat terrain of the Great Hungarian Plain, and I hope these Malza people will like it. And Pliesen will also assign Lieutenant General Farid, who performed well in this war, to General Salomik as his deputy. Its battle plan also aimed to take the territory east of the Tisza River, which was also Eda's greatest satisfaction. After reading this battle plan, Edel signed his name and said to Admiral Pliesen, "This plan is very good, so let's do it like this, okay, Your Majesty." In this way, Romania's new battle plan was decided in the conversation between the two. Chapter 368 Carl 039's distress. When Eda and Preußen were discussing how to continue to deal with his brother-in-law in the palace in Vienna, Kerala, the Emperor of Austria-Hungary, also had his own troubles, and his distress comes from the failure of the war against Italy. In this war planned by him, the Austro-Hungarian army also suffered a lot, and the number of casualties and missing reached more than 100,000. This greatly reduced his prestige in the army, especially the officers who supported him. Funny to say, Caroli's main source of support in the army was the armies of all ethnic groups. On the contrary, the Germans and Hungarians, who have always been the main body of the army, have not had a high approval rate. There are also some unavoidable reasons for this, among which Cole was established as the crown prince for too short a time. to play a major role. It took only 2 short years from the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand to the death of Franz Joseph I, which was not enough for Karol to grow from an ordinary prince to the helm of a country and its Austria-Hungary, the leaking ship. In fact, this dualistic empire, founded by Franz Joseph I, with a unique style, is inherently flawed. The dominant German and Hungarian ethnic groups account for less than half of the country's total population, and there is a huge gap between the two ruling nations. This makes Austria-Hungary often fall into internal quarrels on major issues, which is very unfavorable for its development. Austro-Hungarian bills need the approval of the Austrian and Hungarian parliaments, and if they are inconsistent, it will be a quarrel or compromise. And its army structure is also problematic. In addition to the Imperial Defense Force, there is also the Kingdom Defense Force. This structure allowed the Austro-Hungarian Empire to have no problems in the face of small-scale wars, but it was greatly flawed in a world war such as World War I. The fact that it recruits soldiers from all ethnic groups to convey orders because of different languages can cause headaches. And Austria-Hungary's handling method is also simple and rude. Since the language is not fluent, then you should form an army alone. In this way, a separate army composed of soldiers of all ethnic groups was born, which also brought huge hidden dangers to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. As we all know, regional independence requires its own armed forces, and Austria-Hungary's approach is to bring hope to various regions of different ethnic groups. Of course, if the Allies win this war, Austria-Hungary can slowly suppress this trend. But unfortunately, the last desperate fight between Germany and Austria has failed, which makes many people see the opportunity to split and form their own country, to be the master of the country. Facing the undercurrents surging everywhere, Karol was a little overwhelmed. It was all because Cole ascended the throne too hastily, so that he failed to cultivate enough power, and the old military forces did not respect him enough, so he had to rely on the armies of various ethnic groups. These are all manifestations of incompetence. After Karol, General Conrad was relieved of his position as chief of the general staff. His relationship with the Austrian and Hungarian officers in the army was not too harmonious. It's just that things have been done and there is no turning back. Another incident that showed his incompetence was that he negotiated peace with France through his brother-in-law, Prince Sixtus of Parma, but because he refused to cede any part of the Habsburgs to Italy, the behind-the-scenes activities completely failed. On the other hand, because he supported French demands on Alsace and Lorraine, he offended his ally Germany. This is a manifestation of the ability gap. In the face of the possibility of defeat, how could this be possible? If one wanted to negotiate secretly, to withdraw from the war, but did not want to suffer losses. Moreover, he was not careful in his words and deeds, which made his domestic and allies greatly dissatisfied with him, which in turn damaged his prestige. From the above, it can be seen that Karl is completely unqualified as the helm of an empire. Now the situation has become quite unfavorable for the Allies, and the remarks of US President Johnson, who participated in the war, have caused many people to have different thoughts. At the beginning of this year, the President of the United States announced his 14-point peace plan to the world. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that this is to destroy the morale of the Allies. However, many people pretend to be confused for their own interests or the National Party with this remark. At present, this kind of remarks has affected the Austro-Hungarian army, and many officers who are still loyal to the empire have responded upwards. Article 10, in particular, allowed all ethnic groups in the Austro-Hungarian Empire to be autonomous. For other nations that have been oppressed for a long time, this is simply a great gospel. In the face of this situation, the high-level army did not dare to force it, so Karol could only find Archduke Friedrich, who had a high reputation in the army. I hope that the Grand Duke can use his reputation in the army to appease these soldiers who have become different in their minds. Marshal, the military's heart has become a little impetuous at present. Do you think anyone has a good solution? Karol, who was depressed by this question, cheered up and asked sincerely after Archduke Friedrich came to him. Archduke Friedrich has rarely asked about the specifics of the army, especially after Admiral Conrad was relieved of his position as chief of the general staff. However, looking at Karol, who was asking for advice in a sincere tone, His Excellency the Marshal was naturally willing to help His Majesty the Emperor find a way. This is his loyalty to the Habsburg family for many years, and it is also the reason why Caroli looked for him in the first place. His Majesty. After sorting out his thoughts and language, Archduke Friedrich said, I also understand the current situation in the army, and it is not suitable for forcible suppression during the current war. This can only be solved by propagating patriotism and organizing personnel to condolence to the army. Question. Of course, as a symbol of the empire, His Majesty will go to comfort them in person. I think the effect will be better. Archduke Friedrich stopped here, and Caroli felt that the Archduke had not finished speaking and couldn't help but ask anything else. In the face of the young emperor's inquiry, Archduke Friedrich thought about it and continued, in addition to this, sufficient material guarantees and necessary repairs can also alleviate this impetuous mood. Of course, it needs to cooperate with the above methods. Okay. Also, Archduke Friedrich paused again at this point, with a hesitant look on his face. When Caroli saw the Grand Duke's expression, he asked curiously, is there anything I can say? The question of Caroli made His Excellency the Marshal unable to help. It's not, but this method can cure the situation of the army, but it is very difficult to implement. Come on, just the two of us. I won't spread it out. In the face of the emperor's assurance, Archduke Friedrich put down his entanglement and said, this method is the government's promise that after the war, all ethnic groups can obtain the right to self-government. The last suggestion of Archduke Friedrich made Caroli frown directly. What Archduke Friedrich said about the right to self-government is not finished, but Caroli knew he was talking about equal rights comparable to the Kingdom of Hungary. This is a major event that will shake the foundation of imperial power. Even if Caroli had only been in power for more than a year, he knew how difficult it was to implement. It can be said that Franz Joseph I, who founded the Austro-Hungarian Empire and had great prestige, would feel numb to the scalp about this issue. It was a decision to deny Austrian and Hungarian dominance, and whoever implemented it would be horrified. It was clear that Caroli was afraid of the last suggestion, because if the Archduke's last proposal is implemented, it is very likely that the people of Austria and Hungary will cause a fierce resistance. No one will give up the rights they have acquired, even from other peoples, and Caroli still had some illusions. Even if the Austrian Empire was defeated, it would not be a problem to keep Austria and Hungary. If you implement this proposal yourself, it will shake the foundations of Habsburg rule. Therefore, after considering everything, he said to Archduke Friedrich, the other items will be done as you said. As for the last item, let me think about it. Archduke Friedrich heard the emperor's words and knew that this last rule had been abandoned. But the decision has been made, and he can only obey. Yes, Your Majesty. Archduke Friedrich's lofty prestige came from his infrequent involvement in the specifics of the army, which made him less involved. Now that the Archduke himself went off the court, only God knows how many soldiers will be convinced by the prestige of the Archduke when their own interests are at stake. But they don't have much time left. Chapter 369 Pre-war preparations. 1. We don't know how effective Austria-Hungary has been to appease the troops, but in Romanian Transylvania, a lot of supplies and troops are being built up. In Deva, a transportation hub city in Transylvania, most of the traces damaged by the battle have been repaired. There are only a few buildings that have not yet been repaired, telling the battles of the past. Due to the current war, the Transylvanian army, which was mainly upgraded from the previous army group south, still uses Deva as its headquarters. Maybe this is because of the importance attached to the transportation hub of Deva. And from the lively and noisy scene in the city, this has already shown that it has returned to its former prosperity. However, it can be seen from the fact that most of the people in the city are dressed in military uniforms. This is all deformed prosperity brought about by war in the most prosperous place of the railway station. It has always been bustling. A large number of soldiers got off from here and went to their respective destinations. And on the freight yard of the railway station, there are a lot of materials covered with rain cloths. These are military materials that the warehouse can no longer store temporarily in the open air. They are some unimportant daily necessities such as shovels and tents. This does not mean that they are not important, but the current capacity is not equal, so these materials can only be temporarily accumulated here. At present, trains from Romania arrive in Eva every 5 minutes, and there are only more than 8,000 vehicles attached to transport these materials. You don't have to do the math to know that hundreds of tons of supplies need to be transported every 5 minutes, but it takes time for cars to get to the front lines. It takes a few hours for fast and about 2 days for slow, which leads to a lot of materials that can only be stranded in Eva. The current situation on Transylvanian roads can only accommodate so many cars, so adding more vehicles is completely unworkable. Therefore, we can only wait for the transport vehicle and slowly transport it to waypoint. And just as the soldiers in charge of logistics at the railway station were working tirelessly to remove supplies from a parked train, another train pulled by a steam locomotive entered the station, blowing rough air crack squeak point with the screeching brakes of the train. Another train stopped at another platform. The goods transported by this train are different from those of the trains parked at other platforms. Except for a passenger carriage, the others are flat carriages, and on them are placed steel monsters. After the train stopped, many officers and soldiers came down from the carriage. One of the officers with the rank of captain on his shoulders gave orders loudly. Hurry up and prepare the baffle and other tools to drive the tank down. At the captain's order, the soldiers immediately went to the flat carriage behind. Those who are going to put the baffles on the baffles, and those who take the steel cables take the steel cables. It is a lively scene. At this time, two people walked out of the carriage. They were Brigadier Hoffman and his orderly in colonel uniforms. Let's go. Hoffman, who was carrying a small box, patted the military uniform with a little dust and said to the orderly behind him, "Okay, Brigadier." The orderly with the box in both hands immediately followed the pace of his brigade commander. "Brigade commander, don't take a break before leaving." Seeing Hoffman's appearance, the captain who was instructing the soldiers to unload the truck hurried over to greet him. "No, Lieutenant Sussman. The army's car should be outside the station. All you need to do now is drive the tank to the camp and take care of it." Hoffman looked at the busy platform and said another sentence. "The chariots of the entire brigade behind will be delivered, and you can't let everyone down on the battlefield." "No problem, Brigade Commander. Our company is the best trained company in the entire brigade, and we won't let you down." After a few words of encouragement to Captain Sussman, who clapped his chest, Hoffman took the orderly and left. Hoffman was right, and sure enough, the army headquarters had already sent someone to pick him up, but this candidate was completely unexpected to him. Hi, Hoffman. A hello sounded, causing Hoffman to stop looking for the officer to pick him up. Feeling that the voice was a little familiar, Hoffman immediately looked at Rixiver, who had been a teacher with him. Looking at his former colleague and friend in the military academy, Hoffman's face filled with a bright smile. I saw him walk over quickly, spread out his hands, and gave Rixiver a warm hug. After parting, Hoffman looked at Kashiwa in front of Lee and said, "Rixiver didn't expect you to be in Eva, but you're still at the army headquarters." Facing the enthusiastic Hoffman, Rixiver also said with a smile, "Yeah, I didn't think so. We can still work in this war," which reminds me of my days teaching in the military academy. That's right. Hoffman sighed. If it weren't for the fact that we often discussed issues together in the military academy, I wouldn't have gradually perfected my thoughts and ideas. Rixiver said jokingly. "So you should give me half the credit." No problem. After the two chatted, the guards brought by Rixiver helped Hoffman share some of the luggage, and Rixiver dragged him all the way out of the station. "I knew I was coming to pick you up this time, but I asked for it. You can see that the car is ready." Rixiver pointed to two Model Ts parked next to them. "Look, there's one of my own." "Thank you, Rixiver." "Thank you for our relationship. It's too polite to say thank you. Report to the headquarters first, and then let me entertain you. A place to rest has been prepared for you." Rixiver said, and dragged Hoffman into one of the cars the guards and the orderly named Ham brought by Rixiver could only squeeze into another vehicle. On the way, Rixiver glanced at Hoffman's epaulet and said enviously, "Sure enough, the people who are valued by the king are all colonels." Facing Rixiver's words, Hoffman said modestly, "I'm just one step ahead. You will catch up sooner or later. Don't be modest. When you were in the military academy, your ability was obvious to all. Now you are the brigade commander of the only armored brigade in the army. In my opinion, you will be higher than our group of people in the future. Speaking of this, Rixiver patted the lieutenant colonel rank on his shoulder and continued, this rank is already fast enough among us. And thanks to the mobilization of this war, the number of officers is not enough. It was brought up by force. Now it is born fast. If you really want to be promoted to general in the future, this will be a hard injury. After Rixiver finished speaking, he looked at Hoffman with admiration and said, in contrast, I don't think it's difficult for you to be promoted. The position of brigade commander with real power has to be valued by the king, and there is no problem with promotion in the future. Don't say that, Rixiver. Hoffman retorted first, and then said, don't look at my current status. In fact, I'm under a lot of pressure. Sitting in this position, I have to face the competition of the military heroes, and if I can't get enough results, who will? All the attention will be wiped out. Hoffman said this from his heart. Among their group of officers, Hoffman can be said to be one of the few who stand at the top. But what has always embarrassed him is that he is the only officer in this group who doesn't have enough military exploits. In the Battle of Transylvania, the mountains were not suitable for tanks at all, and there were not many tanks at that time. The same is true for the Bulgarian campaign. Moldavia, the only terrain adapted to it, was beaten by the Germans in the early stage, and the tank performance was not suitable for this kind of defensive warfare. Finally, it was Romania's turn to counterattack, and the result was that the Germans retreated themselves. Hoffman didn't get a suitable fight after he was busy. How could he be reconciled? Okay, stop complaining about Hoffman. After Rixiver comforted her, he glanced left and right and said, I'll let you know in advance. Don't say I said it. Facing Rixiver's mysterious appearance, Hoffman asked, what news? I heard that this time your troops will be assigned to the front line to make sharp knives with several standing divisions. Really, I can still lie to you, but I heard it from other staff officers, so it shouldn't be fake. Rixiver's words made Hoffman excited, but he still didn't forget to thank his friend. Thank you. This news surprised me so much. You're welcome. But Rixiver told him that it wasn't just friendship, that Hoffman would find out sooner or later. I saw Rixiver continue to speak. I don't want to stay at the headquarters for this battle. It's boring. Do you want to leave the army? In the face of friends, Hoffman is very clear. Rixiver admitted generously. Yes, I plan to leave the army. In Rixiver's view, a soldier without merit is not perfect. Moreover, as a lieutenant colonel who was temporarily promoted, he would not be convincing without military exploits, so he planned to leave the army to train himself. Hoffman certainly knew what Rixiver meant when he said so blatantly. Isn't this just the seat of the armored brigade? It seems that my friend has been smooth after a few years of training, and there is really a vacancy for the deputy chief of staff on my side, who is not giving to. At least I can know the bottom line of my friends. Hoffman, who wanted to understand, said with a smile, don't say it. I still need a deputy chief of staff. If you don't dislike the low profile, then I will definitely accept it. Hearing Hoffman's words, Rixiver said happily, I didn't read it wrong, so it's settled. I'll apply when I go back to the headquarters. I still know a little bit about the use of these chariots. It seems that Rixiver planned it early and waited for Hoffman to agree. The two chatted and came to the headquarters. Under the leadership of Rixiver, what Hoffman reported was completed quickly. Since Admiral Salomik was inspecting the front line, the interviews could only be done by Lieutenant Friet. But now the Lieutenant General is very busy and can only postpone the meeting until the next day. So Hoffman had a meal with Rixiver, who was about to become a subordinate, and returned to the residence early to recharge and prepare for the next day's interview. Chapter 370 Pre-War Preparations. Below. Early the next morning, Hoffman dressed up and came to the headquarters to wait for Lieutenant General Friet's summons. He didn't make him wait long, and under the guidance of the secretary, he came to Lieutenant General Friet's office. Colonel Hoffman, please take a seat. His Excellency. Lieutenant General looked up at Hoffman and then handed a document to the secretary, who opened the door. Give this document to the logistics department and let them hurry up. The train station is almost full of supplies. Looking at the busy Lieutenant General Friet, Hoffman sighed inwardly. At the commendation meeting after the end of the Balkan War that year, Lieutenant General Fried was already one of the newly promoted military giants, and he was only a major in charge of transportation. But now that Lieutenant General Fried has a great reputation in this war, it is really sad that he has not been able to show the matching feats. Lieutenant General Fried, who had no idea of Hoffman's feelings at all, picked up the kettle beside him and poured 2 glasses of water after sending the secretary away and handed it to Hoffman. Hoffman hurriedly stood up and took the water glass, but he was a little flattered that his boss poured water for him. Seeing Hoffman's expression, Lieutenant General Fried said with a smile, "It seems that you don't know me well enough. In fact, I think it's good to do it yourself." Hoffman didn't know how to answer the Lieutenant General's words. After taking a sip, Lieutenant General Fried put down the water glass and said, "Actually, I have a special understanding of the new weapon of the tank, and I have also read the training materials you wrote. It is a very good model. In fact, I personally want to call the tank a modernized heavy cavalry that opens a gap in the army, and then the infantry widens that gap until the entire line of defense is torn down." Facing the words of Lieutenant General Fried, Hoffman knew that this was also the correct way to use the tank at present, mainly because the weapon of the tank can only be used in this way, and in his own ideal, he rushed to the rear, and this kind of steel torrent could not yet be done. So he could only answer, "Thank you, Lieutenant General, for your love to me." It's not a kind of love, but you are actually capable. After Lieutenant General Fried replied, he picked up a pack of cigarettes from the table and handed it to Hoffman. "Are you smoking?" "No smoking, thank you." Lieutenant General Hoffman didn't care about his rejection. He took out a point and continued to talk. "Actually, I transferred you this time because I know that any new weapon needs to be on the battlefield so as to discover the possibility of the problem is. Of course, the use of tanks by Britain and France on the Western Front is one of the reasons we can't lag behind the mainstream countries, especially in emerging weapons." After Lieutenant General Fried had a chat with Hoffman, go to the wall where the battle map is hung. And Hoffman knew that this was to tell himself the battle plan, and immediately followed point. But the Lieutenant General first told him about the current situation of the front. At present, we are confronting the Austro-Hungarian army on the long border. Austria-Hungary has placed the enemy's 10th Army in the south, with Adra as a fulcrum. However, because the two places are connected by railways and rivers, this is also the focus of the enemy's defense. It is so heavy that the enemy has 120,000 troops on this line. Hoffman looked at the position of Lieutenant General Fried's fingers. On the map, Edel and Ur, where he is located, are separated by a remnant of the Carpathian Mountains, and there is a railway in the middle connecting the two places. With the Murray River on the north side of the front is the enemy's 9th Army, whose fulcrum is Oradea. This is mainly due to the lack of railways and rivers as transportation lines. So we and the enemy want to deploy less troops than the southern line, so there are only about 10,000 people. In addition, there is a 16th Army of 80,000 people who can be reinforced at any time in Bakashchobeo, which is not far from the enemy. After Lieutenant General Fried introduced the current battle situation, he suddenly said something. "Now where do you think the breakthrough should be made?" Hoffman, who was shocked by Lieutenant General Fried's words, quickly waved his hand and said, "This should be something the commander considers. It doesn't matter, just talk and see." Facing the enthusiasm of Lieutenant General Fried, Hoffman said without thinking, "I think a breakthrough should be made from the direction of Adela." Lieutenant General Fried asked with great interest, "Why do you need to know that the enemy is laying heavy troops here? Because only this direction is suitable for us to exert our full strength." Hoffman first said affirmatively and then gave specific reasons. "The northern front is not suitable for us to attack at all, despite the fact that there are few enemies, because we are very disadvantaged in terms of terrain. From Diva to Cluj on the northern front, to the enemy's main point Oradea, all the way, mountainous and hilly terrain. Oradea, Bekashobeo and Budapest are all plains. This will make us lose to our opponents in terms of material delivery and personnel replenishment. Wars in modern times are all about morale and morale. supplies, and our supplies on the northern front have an absolute disadvantage on the southern front. Don't look at the enemy's heavy defense, but railways and rivers can make us not too bad in this regard. Compared with the enemy, our morale and training are much higher, so the south wire is the best option. Point facing the various reasons given by Hoffmann, Lieutenant General Friet nodded and praised. That's right. It seems that you are well prepared for this battle. Point in the face of the Lieutenant General's award, Hoffmann replied, it's just because everyone can see the difference. I just described it in more detail. Point Lieutenant General Friet didn't care about Hoffmann's modest words. He said it directly. Since you have guessed our plan, let me talk about the mission of your brigade. Point. As soon as he heard the topic of his greatest concern, Hoffmann immediately cheered up. Point. The task of your armored brigade is to form an assault group with the 1st, 3rd, and 7th Cavalry Divisions immediately after the 1st, 5th, and 19th Divisions of the Imperial Guards have opened the breach. For you to break into the enemy's territory, intercept the reinforcement, and disrupt the enemy's deployment. I want you to smash the enemy's interior. In order to support the main force of the army, to destroy the enemy's resistance, occupy the territory east of the Tisza River. The words of Lieutenant General Friet made Hoffmann extremely excited, and this was the opportunity he had been waiting for. As long as you can complete this task beautifully, then the rumors about yourself will be swept away. Point. Your Excellency Lieutenant General, please rest assured that the armored brigade of this mission will be able to complete it well. Point. Very good. Point. Facing Hoffmann's answer, Lieutenant General Friet patted him on the shoulder. He is very satisfied with this. Soldiers just have to have enough confidence in themselves at this time. Lieutenant General Friet asked a question of his concern. How many days will it take for your armored brigade to be assembled? Hoffmann replied immediately. According to the arrangement of the Traffic Management Office, it will take another 3 days for our brigade to arrive in Diva. Point. Hearing Hoffmann's answer, Lieutenant General Friet said directly to him, you still have some time. Do more preparations. Hearing the words of the Lieutenant General, Hoffmann knew that he should leave. But he couldn't help but ask, can I ask, what is the code name of this operation? Thunder. It seemed that it meant a thunderclap, and Hoffmann, who got the answer, left with satisfaction. Point. And Lieutenant General Friet said to himself after Hoffmann left, the ability is good, no wonder it is highly regarded by His Majesty. Chapter 371, Drinking the Tisza River. 1. After a period of preparation, the Romanian army was finally ready for the war on June 1st, the joyous festival of the children of later generations. Romania began its military campaign against the Great Hungarian plain. Point. Early in the morning, the bright red sun appeared in mid-air, pouring light and heat on the earth. When the light shone on the heavy artillery, a long shadow was drawn. The officers and soldiers on the artillery position are busy preparing for the battle, checking the status of the artillery for the last time. Because next, these howitzers and cannons above 150 calibers will become the opening of the battle, allowing the Austro-Hungarian army to taste the power of Romania. Point. Behind the front line, the soldiers preparing for the first wave of the offensive were resting before the battle. Point. They slept and slept, chatted and smoked cigarettes, and some prayed to priests, all of which were using various methods to relax themselves. From their demeanor, it can be seen that they are all elite soldiers who have experienced the smoke of the battlefield and know how to arrange their own work and rest rules reasonably. Point. In fact, in the operational plan of the Transylvanian army, the first attack was to test the strength of the Austro-Hungarian defense line and provide a reference for the next large-scale battle. Therefore, the first wave of attacks is basically composed of veterans of hundreds of battles. Moreover, in order to confuse the enemy, this attack was still a test on the whole line, and the weakness of the Austro-Hungarian army was tested on the 150-kilometer defense line. Since it is a comprehensive test, the ammunition is also quite sufficient. Up to 170,000 tons of ammunition from the country allowed the soldiers to fight openly. From here, you can see the greatness of this attack. Point. At this moment, the rumbling sound of gunfire sounded from the rear, followed by a screeching and crisp whistling noise over their heads, and then a violent explosion sounded from the enemy's position in front. Some curious soldiers stood up and wanted to see the situation of the enemy's position from a distance, but their position was still a little far away. To see the details of the enemy's position point at this time, someone bored listening to the whistling of the cannonball and guessed the caliber of its cannon point. To some stubby sounds came from the sky point the soldier showed off to his comrades beside him. This is the sound of a 150 howitzer. You will know it when you hear it point howl. It's a 210 caliber cannon and it's screaming. I know that point woo. At this time, there was a sound like a train, and the soldier didn't know what to say. Point, a voice came from behind them. Point, this is a 280 caliber train gun. I don't know now. Point, the soldier and his companions immediately looked back and found that their company commander was standing behind them. Startled. Point, hello company commander. Seeing the restrained expressions of his soldiers, the company commander walked up to the soldier, who analyzed the differences in the sound of the shells and said, Thomas, you're not the only one who likes chatting with artillerymen. I like it too. Point, obviously, the company commander's level of chatting is higher than the soldiers, and Thomas, who was exposed, can only stand here innocently with an embarrassed look. Point, after piercing the opponent's hide, the company commander looked at the somewhat restrained soldiers and left without taking a cloud. Point, after the company commander left, the others immediately surrounded him. Point, it's good for Thomas to be punctured by the company commander. Ha 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 ha. Point, a cheerful atmosphere pervaded for a while. After 3 hours of heavy artillery shelling, the Austro-Hungarian front line appeared to be riddled with holes, and the soldiers who were ready to attack at this time had been preparing for a long time. At this time, the artillery fire began to spread in depth, and the time to attack had come. Point, attack. It's our turn. Point, following the orders of the leading officers, the soldiers immediately rushed out of the position and charged towards the enemy positions under the enemy's artillery fire. Point, the Austro-Hungarian soldiers, who had just recovered from the artillery fire, immediately began to fight back when they saw the enemy attack. For a while, the two sides turned into a hail of bullets, but the Romanian soldiers who attacked this time immediately felt that the enemy's resistance was wrong. Point, an officer who led the team hid behind a stone and said, strangely, strange, we haven't gotten too close to the enemy. How can the firepower of their counterattack on their positions respond so much? In fact, not only the leading officers felt it, but also the generals who were observing the position. When the Romanian soldiers were still 500 or 600 meters away from the first line positions, the Austrian-Hungarian positions were full of fire. This is obviously quite unreasonable. Indiscriminate exposure of firepower can only lead to artillery counterattacks from the attackers. Sure enough, within a few minutes, a large number of 75 shells fell on these fire points, swept away the suppression of Romanian soldiers. This in turn brought the Romanian soldiers closer to their positions in a secret observation post. Lieutenant General Ankada of the 1st Division of the Imperial Guard just looked away from a pair of high-powered telescopes. With a puzzled expression, he said to the Chief of Staff beside him, the enemy's positional response is much worse than when he fought in Eva before. Point, really? Let me see what's going on. Point, hearing Lieutenant General Ankada's words, the Chief of Staff leaned over to the telescope to observe. Point, after observing for a while, the Chief of Staff said in surprise, it's true, the enemy's resistance is much worse than before. Point, having said this, he couldn't help but ask, is it possible that this is a trap set by the enemy? Facing the words of the Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Ankada thought for a while and said, it's possible, but it's unlikely. Where did they get the information to know where our main attack is? The Chief of Staff also put this idea behind him. The main attack location can be informed to them 2 days in advance, and there is little possibility of leaking. So he came up with a reliable solution. Would you like to ask other brothers on the front line if they are in the same situation as us? Then this is a good opportunity. Point, can point. After obtaining the consent of Lieutenant General Ankada, the Chief of Staff immediately replied, I'm going to do it. Point. After about a quarter of an hour, the Chief of Staff happily returned with a telegram. Commander, this is not just the case of one of our divisions. Other divisions have responded that the enemy's resistance is declining this time, and the Group Army headquarters has just sent a telegram. Let us take advantage of this good opportunity. Point, hearing the words of his Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Ankada stepped forward to receive the telegram. After reading it, Lieutenant General Ankada shouted in his heart that God help me, and he immediately picked up the phone and said to him, "Transfer me to 2 Brigade point within 2 minutes. The phone was connected to the 2nd Brigade headquarters. "Hey, the teacher is me. What instructions do you have?" The familiar voice of Colonel Zoltan, the brigade commander of the 2nd Brigade, came from the microphone, and Lieutenant General Ankada immediately said, "Colonel Zoltan, have you understood the current situation of the enemy's front line? I have observed that the resistance is not strong." Hearing Colonel Zoltan's answer, Ankada spoke again. "Okay, now that you understand the situation, now I order that your brigade immediately launch a full-scale attack on the enemy's frontline positions, and do not give the enemy a chance to breathe." I understand the teacher. I will organize an offensive. After Lieutenant General Ankada put down the phone, he immediately leaned over to the high-powered telescope to observe the battle on the front line. The attack of the 2nd Brigade came quickly. After 10 minutes, the scene of the attack of thousands of soldiers appeared before us, which made the resistance of the Austro-Hungarian soldiers on the position even more difficult. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Ankada received a call from Colonel Zoltan. It is informed that the first line position has been won, and the subsequent positions can be attacked. At this time, Ankada knew that the time had come, and immediately put the brigade in his hand into the battle. After a not too fierce battle, at 11:45 noon the next day, the Guard Division commander had completed the task assigned to him by the group army. The 19th Division also broke through the defense line at 1:30 in the afternoon. Now a gap as wide as 8 kilometers has appeared in front of them. The first step of the army's plan has been reached, and it is suitable for the assault group to go into battle. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372, Drinking the Matisa River, 2. The Romanian army opened a breach in the defense line in less than 2 days, which the Austro-Hungarian army never expected. Headquartered within the Austro-Hungarian 10th Army in Edel, Lieutenant General Sam was fuming about the situation. Damn, how did they fight? They were broken through by the enemy in less than 2 days. Will they fight again? They are all pigs. In the face of the commander's anger, the staff and other command staff did not dare to get too close, for fear of becoming the target of venting. It was broken through and released in less than 2 days. No wonder Lieutenant General Sam was angry. In the defense plan, designed by the Lieutenant General, under the blessing of the fortifications, the frontline confrontation troops need to guard at least until the reinforcement arrive, and the reinforcement arrive for 3 days. In fact, Lieutenant General Sam knew that there were some rumors in the army, and he also knew that the soldiers were more or less war weary. But it is a duty of the soldier to serve the country, and it is also his duty to command the soldiers to fight. So when the frontline troops were attacked, he immediately understood the situation. After discovering the main attack site in Romania, he immediately dispatched the 2 divisions that had been prepared, and he immediately sent a telegram to the 16th Army behind him, asking them to reinforce him. But now the position has been penetrated in less than 2 days, and he has not even waited for reinforcement. This is something he never expected. This not only disrupted his deployment, but also left a huge gap for the enemy. He just got the latest news that the enemy sent heavy troops to pounce on him through this gap. If he didn't repel the enemy's move, then his 10th Army might not be able to retreat. If so, the result will be catastrophic, the consequences of which cannot be imagined. Why doesn't this make him burn with anger and vent his emotions? However, he also knew that simply venting his emotions would not help, so he recovered quickly, and how to make up for it now is the key point. After Lieutenant General Sam calmed down, he immediately came to the battle map. Looking at the position of the frontline gap just marked in red, he pondered. At this time, the Chief of Staff of the Army, Major General Hans, who arrived at this time, saw that Lieutenant General Sam had calmed down and walked to the side without disturbing the thinking of Lieutenant General. That's the only way to do it now. Lieutenant General Sam, who stood in front of the map thinking for a long time, said something. Any solution at this time? The voice of Major General Hanlands came from the side. You came. Sam turned to see his chief of staff standing next to him, a smile on his face, but the worry in the corner of his eyes had been hidden by him. Certainly, why can't I come here? Sam knew that the chief of staff was talking about his anger, but he had calmed down now. However, as a partner for many years, Major General Hans has already seen the hidden expression of the Lieutenant General, but he did not make a sound and continued to ask, I have come up with a solution. Yes, Sam pointed to a location 15 kilometers away from Edel and said, I plan to intercept the enemy's frontier and buy time for the troops on the front line to retreat. Hans looked at the location. Sam said it was a small town called Sol, and he had an impression of it. This is a crossroads, not only to Edel, but also a road to Oradea. The location is very important. And there are undulating hills here, especially there is a river in the east of the town, which also brings some convenience to the defense. It can be regarded as one of the few good positions near Edel that is conducive to defense. So how many people do you plan to put in this town? I'm going to let. Thinking of the recently fluctuating military heart, Sam stopped what he was about to say and changed his mouth to say, I put the only 3 divisions in my hand and only ask them to resist for 4 days. The 16th Army should be able to arrive here. Hans was very surprised to hear Sam's words. As a partner for many years, he knows it too well, and it is very rare that he does not have a reserve team on hand. He still couldn't help reminding, don't think about it again, don't think about it. If this can't stop the enemy's offensive, I have nothing to say. Looking at Sam's bitter words, Hans also sighed inwardly. How could he not know about the recent turmoil in the military's heart? And now it depends on how much fighting spirit these soldiers have left. And the two of them fell silent for a while. At the center of the conversation between Sam and Hans, the assault group consisting of the 1st, 3rd, and 7th Cavalry Divisions was already on its way to Edel. Soldiers scattered on both sides of the road, and vehicles such as tanks and towed artillery were marching slowly in the middle of the road. So many vehicles make the road so congested that it looks like a slow-moving earthworm from the air. In order to leave enough space for these big men, the soldiers are more hard-pressed. They have already walked out of the range of the road and stepped on the field, but I believe that no one dares to ask them for the loss of young crops. And further down the road, the cavalry spread out cover. The cavalry of the brigade watched vigilantly on both sides, guarding against possible enemy raids throughout the long march. Hoffman's armored brigade was lined up in the rear along with the towed artillery. This made him a little worried, afraid that he would not get the chance to go to the battlefield, because so far they had not encountered the interception of the Austro-Hungarian army. Only the Austro-Hungarian reconnaissance cavalry and planes came a few times, but they were all dispersed. During this march, Hoffman met acquaintances again. Lieutenant Colonel Antonescu, who is now the commander of the cavalry regiment, was in the same car with him. It's good that you are here. It's not like I'm busy doing some errands and guards. Lieutenant Colonel Antonescu, who was sitting next to Hoffman, stretched his limbs and hummed enviously. Hoffman did not expect that it would be the lieutenant colonel's troops who would guard him. For this Antonescu, who has only met a few times, he can't drive others away, so this is the situation. But he couldn't help but ask, Antonescu, in case of an emergency, don't you have to command the troops? Regarding Hoffman's words, Lieutenant Colonel Antonescu was still lying on the leather seat, and he replied without even moving his hand, it is impossible to meet this way. The combat effectiveness of these Austro-Hungarians has declined so fast, they can't rush to die. They must have chosen a good position to wait for us to attack. Do you think they will wait for us to attack in Edel? Not to mention that the lazy Antonescu's battlefield insight is still good. He couldn't guess the location when he went out, and he touched the mentality of the Austro-Hungarian army. Hoffman looked at Antonescu's expression and asked curiously, don't you want to make a military exploit? Why don't you want to? But the opponent is not cooperating. I also want the commander of the Austro-Hungarian army to lead the army to fight us to the death, just as you broke through the opponent's front line, and I'm in charge of chasing down the enemy's defeated soldiers. It is best to also arrest Lieutenant General Sam. It would be perfect to live, but unfortunately it's impossible. Listening to Antonescu's rambling words, Hoffman was also surprised that he could make friends with such a person. While the two were chatting, a messenger on horseback rushed to the side of the 2 in the town of Sol, 20 kilometers away. A large enemy force was found. Lieutenant General Mandive ordered the two to speed up and prepare for the battle point. Here the command of the commander of the assault group, Lieutenant General Mandiv, the commander of the 3rd Division. Antonescu was refreshed immediately. He immediately asked his orderly to lead his horse, and after riding it, he said goodbye to Hoffman. Would you like us to have a comparison in the next battle point? Faced with Antonescu's embarrassing proposal, Hoffman declined. Forget it, I don't gamble. What a boring guy. After seeing Antonescu leave, Hoffman also recruited messengers and ordered to increase the speed of the advance. He had long been impatient for this battle point on the side of Antonescu, who left on horseback. The orderly who had followed him for many years asked curiously, "Captain, I don't think the colonel treated you very warmly, so why are you staying there?" Facing the question from his orderly, Antonescu replied, "What do you know?" When the observation group chatted with him, I knew that this person is very capable. Sure enough, he was the colonel's brigade commander in less than 3 years. Now, I'm still the head of the group. I've only talked a few times, but who can be enthusiastic if they haven't met in 2 or 3 years? After Antones replied to the orderly, he thought about himself. During the chat with Hoffman, he felt that the other party's level had improved a lot, and he thought Hoffman had a good saying. It's not enough to stay in one arm all the time. You need to go to other arms to see more and broaden your horizons. Now this war has proved that the cavalry is a branch of the dead. Although it still has some role in Eastern Europe, this cannot change the fact that the arms are declining and you need to plan ahead. Chapter 373, Drinking the Matissa River, Part 2. The afterglow of the sun shines on the earth, and the small town of Sol is no longer the same as it used to be. Diffuse smoke and choking gunpowder shrouded the place, making the town a bit like a desolate atmosphere in a fairy tale. On the other side of the town, Austro-Hungarian soldiers were retreating. But as you can see from their terrified expressions, they just want to run for their lives now. These terrified soldiers could only lighten their load as much as possible in order to escape from this hell to them. Therefore, discarded weapons and supplies can be seen along the way, ranging from small guns and ammunition to heavy artillery. Armored vehicles were abandoned on the roads and in the wilderness. In fact, these actions of theirs can only strengthen the belief of chasing soldiers behind them. So a larger pursuit was underway, with soldiers from the Romanian cavalry division galloping on horseback, approaching quickly from the flanks, driving the Austro-Hungarian soldiers. It's like a pack of wolves ready to hunt, picking the best prey. Hoffman sticks his upper body out of a jackal tank to watch the harvest. For him, this battle was really enjoyable, fully exerting the power of his armored troops. 3 days ago, when they arrived at the small town of Sol, the Austro-Hungarian army had already been stationed here. However, due to the lack of time, there is a lack of fortifications, especially the anti-tank trenches that require a lot of work. Lieutenant General Mandiv, who was their interim commander, was also experienced and immediately spotted the flaw. He immediately used his 3rd Division as a fist, coupled with the armored brigade to strengthen the attack and attacked the enemy's main position. The 7th Division is responsible for containing the flank positions and preventing the enemy from drawing troops, while the Cavalry Division is responsible for the interception of the battlefield and the oppression of the enemy's rear. Lieutenant General Mandiv set is to bully you with unreasonable tactics with few troops and supporting weapons, which will make the defenders feel uncomfortable. After 3 days of resistance, the military's morale finally collapsed, and they scattered and fled to the rear. Now Edel is the ripe fruit in front of them, and they can pick it, as long as they reach out. Romania tasted the sweet fruit of victory, then the Austro-Hungarian army only tasted the bad fruit of defeat. In the city of Edel, Lieutenant General Sam, the commander of the 10th Army, slumped weakly on a chair in the battle hall. Around him were people busy preparing to evacuate. They loaded the items they needed to take away into the car, and the black smoke that burned the documents that could not be taken away had filled the sky. Everyone looked more or less frightened, and the atmosphere at the headquarters was quite dull. As his partner, Major General Hans, was directing the evacuation of the personnel. After arranging things properly, Major General Hans came to his partner. Looking at His Excellency Lieutenant General with a distressed face, Hans said, "Sam, now we need to evacuate." In the face of the Chief of Staff's words, Lieutenant General Sam did not answer, but asked him in confusion. "This battle should not have ended like this. Did I command wrong? Hans, tell me, is it my fault?" Seeing his partner's disheartened appearance, Hans replied with some reluctance, "Sam, this is not your problem. None of us expected that the combat effectiveness of the troops below would diminish so quickly. These are all those rumors spread by goddamn politicians." Major General Hans's words also represented his inner thoughts. In his view, these politicians are self-serving guys. At a time when the empire is going through a difficult time, when everyone needs to work together, they cooperated with the enemy for their own selfish desires, which made the empire suffer even more. If I had the chance, I would definitely send all these people to the gallows. In fact, Hans's ideas are very marketable in the middle and high level military, but now the soldiers are encouraged by these people, but they are tied. Hans's words did not make Sam recover. Instead, he said, "Hans, please stop comforting me. I know very well about this battle, and I have a great responsibility for not finding out the situation of the army. I hope you can bring it with you. Leave the rest of the soldiers out. I'm tired and don't want to endure this anymore." As soon as Hans heard the secret message, no, his old partner was determined to die. After turning his head quickly, he immediately said, "Sam, I can't do what you asked. You also know my abilities, and you can't do what you want. Now I need you to get the rest of the 10th Army soldiers led out of danger. Don't forget, there are tens of thousands of people on the front line who failed to evacuate, and I can't come up with this evacuation plan. You don't want these bloody soldiers to suffer more losses." Perhaps it was Major General Hans's persuasion that had an effect, or perhaps because he thought of the tens of thousands of soldiers still on the front lines, Sam's eyes finally got some brilliance. You really can't help it, really. The evacuation of the headquarters has already made me devastated. I haven't been able to come up with a way to retreat from the front line. Facing Sam's question, Hans told a small white lie. Indeed, these bloody soldiers should not accept this result. After Lieutenant General Sam said this, he immediately came to the military map that had not been taken down. He looked at the map in front of him and said to the Chief of Staff beside him, "Let the troops on the left flank immediately withdraw in the direction of the 9th Army. Send a report to Lieutenant General Fan Sitting of the 9th Army, requesting him to send troops to respond. The troops on the right flank go to Serbia. Internal evacuation. As long as you withdraw across the Mur River into Serbia, I believe the Romanians will not be pursuing." As for the 3 divisions in the middle, Lieutenant General Sam said that he was stuck here. With the withdrawal of both the left and right flanks, their outcome was already doomed. Lieutenant General Sam thought for a while and then said, "Let them evacuate on their own. Now it will be seen how many of them are left to retreat to the territory controlled by Austria-Hungary, which only God knows. Also, send a report to the 16th Army to inform them of our decision. The 16th Army did not want to be attacked by the defeated soldiers, so they would definitely retreat. At present, only the Tisza River line can be used as a line of defense. I believe they will know these basic common sense." Lieutenant General Sam said this, and after thinking about it, he said, "Leave the Guard regiment, try to collect the defeated soldiers, and we retreat to the west of the Tisza River to defend." In the face of Lieutenant General Sam's series of orders, Major General Hans immediately asked a staff officer to record and send the report. Looking at the recovered Sam, Hans stretched out his hand and said, "Let's evacuate now. Don't give the enemy the honor of capturing the commander of the Imperial Army." "Okay, I'll go now." The two walked out of the headquarters and left the city that was about to fall under the escort of a few soldiers, and the Austro-Hungarian people who fled on the streets all swarmed away. This has saved Romania a lot of trouble in the future. The Romanian soldiers who were chasing the vanquished finally entered the city hours after Lieutenant General Sam left. The cavalry division, which was the vanguard, did not stay here for long. After leaving a regiment to await the arrival of the infantry, they immediately resumed the pursuit. because their task is not to let these defeated soldiers gather to delay the pace of the Romanian army. This time they will drink horses in the Tisza River, and Lieutenant Colonel Antonescu was unfortunately selected to wait for the arrival of the follow-up troops. Looking at the brigade of cavalry walking away, the lieutenant colonel spat fiercely to the ground, and then he ordered his subordinates, "Keep me in order in the city. Don't let me find you lazy." Army Transylvania defeated Lieutenant General Sam's 10th Army and occupied Edela. The Austro-Hungarian 9th Army, located on the northern front, was afraid of being outflanked and immediately gave up its position and retreated to the front line of the Tisza River defense. And a large area east of the vast Tisza River was occupied by the Romanians for this battle. The Allies were surprised by the drop in morale of the Austro-Hungarian army, in addition to their praise for the combat effectiveness of the Romanian army. Many of its newspapers trumpeted that Austria-Hungary could no longer hold on, and victory was at hand. Austria-Hungary naturally refuted the remarks of these allied countries. However, for the defeat in Hungary, many people in Austria-Hungary have other thoughts. Let this dualistic country become more crumbling like a broken house. Chapter 374, Crumbling Empire. The time entered mid-June. After a defeat with the Romanians, the endurance of the Austro-Hungarian people seemed to have finally reached its limit. There have been more incidents of blatantly promoting anti-war rhetoric on the streets, and the attitude of the local government has become more subtle. They are not punishing these people, as if they hadn't discovered it. The waves lurking in the dark began to appear in the eyes of the world, which made the environment in Austria-Hungary worrying. Now it seems that anyone can criticize the various measures of the government. The public is starving because of this war, while the officials are drinking and drinking. The government oppresses ethnic minorities to deprive each other of their right to live. These remarks, which were completely dead not to be said in the past, are now popping up all over the country. In Prague, Bohemia, formerly known as the Czech Republic, a lot of people gathered in a manor outside the city. These are people of considerable renown in the region, and they are now gathered together to discuss a major event concerning the future of the nation. The surrounding windows were heavily curtained, and vigilant guards lined the perimeter, and the voices pierced from time to time, and the whole made the guards look around more vigilantly. Everyone has seen the current war situation. The defeat of this war is inevitable. At this time, we must make our own prudent decision for the future of the Czechs. Please note that your decision will be recorded in the history books in the future, so that future generations will appreciate the dedication of our nation for independence. In addition, I would like to tell you good news, that President Masaryk has received a batch of military and economic aid from the United States, which will provide great assistance to our independence. A tall and thin middle-aged man was speaking generously to the participants about the importance of this secret gathering, and what he called Masaryk was the leader of the Bohemian independence movement. This Masaryk was born on March 7, 1850 in Kondinan, Moravia. Graduated from the University of Vienna with a PhD in 1882. He was a professor of philosophy at Charles University, and he founded publications such as Athens Literature and Times, criticizing the autocracy and national oppression of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Elected to the Austrian Reichstag several times in 1900, the Czech People's Party was created, renamed the Czech Progressive Party in 1905, seeking to realize the autonomy of the Czechs within the Austro-Hungarian Empire. After the outbreak of the war, Masaryk went into exile in December 1914. Because his strong claim to autonomy was not in the interests of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. During this period, he used his prestige to unite the Czechs abroad, to carry out propaganda against the Austro-Hungarian Empire, hoping to fight for national independence with the support of the Allies. And he also organized the Czechoslovak Corps in Russia, France, Italy and other countries to support the Entente. After his unremitting efforts, finally in 1916 in Paris, he established the Czech National Committee and served as its chairman. As he calls Masaryk as chairman, it can be seen that he is not a member of the Czech Progressive Party, nor a member of the Czechoslovak National Council established in Paris. Mr. Stefanik, you said that after our independence, what should we do with the industries belonging to the Austro-Hungarian Empire? A fat-headed man stood up and asked, and he did not sit down after he had finished, but waited for the answer from Mr. Stefanik. This sentence caused quite a stir in the meeting hall, because in Bohemia, there were too many assets belonging to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. As a rare coal and iron area in the empire, the government has invested a lot of money to develop it over the years. After years of accumulation, these wealth can make many people jealous, and they can't wait to rush to eat a mouthful of oil. The middle-aged man, known as Stefanik, glanced at the dead fat man and took in the actions of many people present. At the same time, I despise the short-sighted and greedy actions of these people in my heart. If you haven't succeeded independently, you just want to take advantage. Sooner or later, these people will be eliminated. However, before the meeting, he had discussed with Chairman Masaryk that these industries could be distributed to some local influential people. So he looked at everyone's actions and said, "We have already discussed the question of Mr. Kroner's. In the future, when the nation becomes independent, we will unconditionally nationalize these industries to compensate the Austro-Hungarian government for these years. The oppression of our nation. After taking it back, we will auction these properties and let the capable people continue to operate." Everyone who was present knew what Stefanik said. This was an intention to use these Austro-Hungarian industries as a reward. Nationalization, auctions and other actions are just to hide from the public. Stefanik's answer did not let the fat-headed Mr. Kroner sit down, but he asked again, "Mr. Benz, do you agree with Stefanik's suggestion?" With Kroner's words, let those present turn their attention to a middle-aged man with baldness and glasses. This should be Mr. Benz. In the face of Kroner's inquiry, the Mr. Benz stood up and said, "I agree with Mr. Stefanik's suggestion. It has a huge impact on our national independence cause, and I have no reason to oppose it. This kind of advice that benefits the nation." Benez's words finally pushed the Mr. Kroners back into his seat. As for this note-picking Kroners, everyone present knew that he was a factory owner who made his fortune by purchasing grain and then worked in the textile industry. It wasn't his wealth that made him famous, it was his greed. Working in his factory is generally 10-15% lower than other factories. However, thanks to the fact that he knows many big people and the price is relatively low, the products of his factory have never been short of sales, which can actually make more wealth. He had always supported the Vienna government before, but now that he saw that Austria-Hungary was on the verge of going, he immediately threw himself into the cause of supporting independence. It can be regarded as a standard wallgrass, and it is also a greedy wallgrass. In fact, people like Kroners are not few in today's secret gatherings. However, in order to take care of the overall situation, and these people also have a lot of power in the local area, they still have to be pulled in. As for why he asked Benz for his opinion, quite simply, because Benz is the leader of the Czech National Party. This was very influential among Czech intellectuals, businessmen, and landowners. They advocated the right to self-government through the Austro-Hungarian government, so they formed radical and moderate factions with Masaryk's National Progressive Party. And now Benez's words represent the same interests of the two factions, so this can convince Kroners. Now that the representative two parties have agreed, this has also strengthened the confidence of many people who have a wait-and-see mood. Seeing this situation, Stefanik immediately said, "Now let's vote by show of hands on whether to mobilize people to take to the streets to protest against the war." After speaking, he raised his right hand, and the crowd of people in the hall basically raised their hands. Even those who were still hesitant immediately raised their hands when they saw such a situation, and some people were even about to stand up. Seeing that everyone agreed, Stefanik said, "Then we decided to launch a public demonstration against the war in 3 days. This time we must show Vienna our determination. I hope everyone will do their best. Come to mobilize the people, and future history will remember this day." Stefanik's words made many people feel that they were making history, and many people showed a sacred expression, as if they had been sublimated. This secret meeting was a complete success after most of the people were gone. Benz found Stefanik alone. When there were only two of them, Benz couldn't help asking, "This time Britain and France really agree to let us occupy Slovakia and other places in the future?" Facing Ben's question, Stefanik nodded and replied, "Yes, this is what British Prime Minister George and French Prime Minister Clemenceau told us personally. As long as we can keep Vienna busy, they will take Slovakia. The region is allocated to us to establish a new country. Think about it, how much help it will be to our new country in the future. And Masaryk has talked with the United States, and the United States agrees with the attitude of the United States. This is our opportunity. Never give up, Stefanik said at the end, with a determined look on his face. It seems that he has been obsessed with Slovakia. It is true that the Czech region has developed industry, but the population is less than 5 million. If the Slovak region is added, then the pressure of the underpopulation can be alleviated to some extent. Moreover, the agriculture in Slovakia can also fill the gaps in the Czech region, which will be of great benefit to the new country in the future. I just don't know how the people in the Slovak region will react. There are also the most autonomous parties in the region, especially the Slovak Democratic Party. Facing Benez's concerns, Stefanik said nonchalantly, this is the decision of the Allied powers. Do these Slovaks dare to oppose it? Stefanik's words, Ben said after thinking for a while. That's true. Let's prepare for the parade now. If something goes wrong this time, it will be a disaster. After 3 days of preparation, on June 23rd, Brno, Ostrava, Pilsen, Karlovy Vary and other places in the Czech region, a large number of people gathered and launched a massive anti-war game. Under the slogan "Bread, not war," they gathered to denounce the government's inaction. And the most powerful is of course in Prague, where nearly 200,000 people gathered for anti-war demonstrations. The number of anti-war demonstrations in the entire Czech region exceeded the 1 million mark, and such a scale left the government helpless. And the appeasement order from Vienna was not recognized by the people. Anti-war games in the Czech region stimulated other regions. After seeing the government's incompetent response, demonstrations broke out one after another in Croatia, Bohemia, the Kingdom of Hungary and other regions. These demonstrations affected all classes in Austria-Hungary. Even in Austria, where the Habsburg family made their fortune, large-scale demonstrations broke out. This made the already crumbling Austro-Hungarian Empire even worse. Now that Franz I is resurrected, there is no way to quell the anger of the people. The Austro-Hungarian regime became dangerous. Chapter 375 The Crumbling Empire, continued. Peace, not war, we want bread. One after another, the slogans of demonstrations burst into the Hofburg Palace, which made Karolai, who was staying in the palace, restless. The soldiers guarding the palace did not bring him much security. These bursts of slogans sounded like a life-threatening talisman, making him restless. Your Majesty, we still have to wait. The Prime Minister has already gone to get involved with these demonstrators. I believe they can understand the current difficulties. Listening to the comfort of Earl Lawrence, the head of the court, did not reassure Carlyle. It's just the torment of waiting, and I really need to find someone to chat to relieve it. Moreover, Earl Lawrence is loyal to the Habsburg family, and is also a suitable person to chat. Carlyle thought of the current situation as soon as he chatted, and he no longer maintained the demeanor of a king, and said a little angrily, I know what you said, these people are just instigated. The real danger is the people hiding behind them. What do these people want? Don't they know that the price of losing the empire will be very heavy? Your Majesty, getting angry will not solve the problem. Please calmly think about it, and face the proposals of these demonstrators. As soon as Count Lawrence finished speaking, he found that the Austrian Prime Minister Heinlein, who had gone to negotiate, had returned. However, the Prime Minister's expression is not very good. It seems that the negotiation with the crowd outside is not very good. Carl saw what Earl Lawrence discovered, but he still wanted to know the result. Prime Minister, how's the negotiation going? Facing the monarch's question, Prime Minister Heinlein saluted and replied, not ideal. These demonstrators demand that the empire immediately cease the war, restore the army, and Prime Minister Heinlein said that he was stuck here, which led to Carol's questioning. And what? Facing Carol's questioning, Heinlein said the final condition, and ask your Majesty to hand over the power to the people. Heinlein's words immediately ignited Carol's anger, and he said with a cold face, to the people. I think it is to the conspirators hiding behind these people. Czechs, Croats, the Slovenians are demonstrating for independence. The Hungarians are leaving the empire, and now even the Germans want power. then they will change the political system and kick me out of the way, right? The empire is sorry for them. Everyone wants to leave him. In the words of Prime Minister Heinlein, it completely ignited the anger of Carly, and the series of bad news made him out of control. After ascending to the throne, there was first disobedience from the army and the senators of the government, then the defeat of the war, and then the demonstrations of popular dissatisfaction. The outbreak of various problems in less than 2 years completely shattered his inner support. He has the urge to break the jar and let these mobs taste the taste of bayonet point. But the only reason in his heart prevented him from doing this, because after doing so, the nearly 1,000-year history of the Habsburg family will also be wiped out, and no one will show mercy to the tyrant who ordered the shooting of the people, and it is still a destined tyrant. Everyone would come and stomp on him to improve their popularity. And Karl is not a fool. He doesn't want to be a stepping stone for these people at all. And he is also a person he hates. Prime Minister Heinlein looked at the young emperor in front of him and vented his dissatisfaction. Having been a political figure for many years, the current situation has become a plaster, and I believe the emperor will understand this. Slowly Carly's roar subsided. He also knows that venting his emotions will not change the current situation. What needs to be considered now is the continuation of the Habsburg family point. After taking a few deep breaths in a row, Karl still felt that his mind was in a mess. At this time, he looked at the Prime Minister in front of him and couldn't help but asked, Prime Minister, in this situation, do you have any good advice? Facing Karl's question, Prime Minister Heinlein flashed a few thoughts in his mind and said, Your Majesty, the current situation is very dangerous for the empire and you. First of all, you need to appease the angry people, then let the queen. It is a good way to bring people to condolences to the elderly, children and the homeless. Moreover, more materials must be used this time, so that people all over the country can feel or see the benevolent side of the royal family, and there must be general publicity in the newspapers. In addition, it's okay, let people spread rumors that I and the Minister of War are responsible for everything related to the government and the army, and the royal family is completely unaware of it. The words of Prime Minister Heinlein made Karl feel the old minister's enthusiasm for the Habsburg family. This is to use the reputation of himself and Archduke Friedrich to keep the royal family's voice. Thinking of this, Karl couldn't help but stepped forward and said to the Prime Minister, I can understand that you sent the Queen. You want me to imitate my great uncle Sissi, but you go to the top to quell the public's anger. How can this be? It will destroy the Prime Minister. You have point. Facing Karl's words, Prime Minister Heinlein bowed his head and replied, This is the best and only feasible way. In addition to the measures to deal with the domestic people, Germany must be avoided internationally. We must find a way to make the allied countries forgive us for starting the war. Both sides lost too much in this war. If we are not forgiven, the allied countries will give us. It has been demolished. So we have to act fast. First of all, the disputed area between us and Italy must be given up. In addition, the area of Bosnia and Herzegovina that caused the war will be assigned to Serbia, and Transylvania, where the Romanian majority is the majority, has also agreed to give it to Serbia. Romanians. Also for Croatian and Bohemian autonomy. The Prime Minister said a lot of conditions to agree to the allied powers, and Karl couldn't help but ask in shock, is it necessary to do this? Isn't this about tearing down the empire? In the face of Karl's question, Prime Minister Heinlein said with a wry smile, it must be done. At least we will keep Austria and Hungary. The Austro-Hungarian Empire can at least maintain its name. Can this keep the empire? There is great hope to keep the empire, but the royal family still needs to make sacrifices. What sacrifice? Your Majesty needs to abdicate and let your son or brother inherit this position. In addition, you must let go of power. It's better to be like the Kingdom of Sweden and only keep your name and a few properties. The words of Prime Minister Heinlein made Karl's hands and feet cold. It's not that he doesn't want to abdicate. In fact, he doesn't want to do it for a long time in this hot position. It's just that most of the wealth of the Habsburg family has to be handed over, and the Habsburg family is not in power. This is not his final say. After all, he was only the head of the Habsburg family, and based on what he knew about the rest of the family, it was completely impossible to accept. At that time, the Swedish royal family had the weakest sense of existence. It makes me think again. The Prime Minister stood quietly in front of Karl, waiting for his monarch to make a decision. After a long time, when Prime Minister Heinlein thought that the emperor was going to fall asleep, Karl made his own decision. Prime Minister, regarding the domestic part, you can follow your plan, but regarding the issue of foreign countries and imperial power, it has to be discussed with the rest of the Habsburgs. I hope you understand. Karl's words made Prime Minister Heinlein look like he was a few years older. He bent over to Karl, after performing a standard noble etiquette, to meet the king and replied, "Yes, my majesty." After sending Prime Minister Heinlein away, Karl invited members of the family to discuss his proposal. I object. This is absolutely not possible. The descendants of the Habsburgs must not be driven out just like that. Absolutely not. This is not acceptable. Sure enough, when Karl said Prime Minister Heinlein's proposal, he immediately aroused overwhelming opposition. There are even those who claim that the Prime Minister is a spy and should be arrested and tortured. Sure enough, power is intoxicating, completely disregarding its own dangers. In the face of the excited family members, Karl's character flaws were exposed, and he hesitated. Or rather, he flinched in the face of overwhelming opposition. In the end, the meeting about letting the Habsburgs let go of power was suppressed by anticlimactic. When Prime Minister Heinlein heard the news at home, he sighed alone. His actions aroused the curiosity of his son Helfen Heinlein. "Father, why do you sigh about this? These Habsburg families are ruthless people. Take you, father, to calm these people." It seems that he is very dissatisfied with his father's responsibility for the war. Looking at his angry son, Heinlein said with a smile, "Who told you that I was the one who took the responsibility?" Facing his father, who was still smiling at this time, Helfen Heinlein thought that his home might be demolished by angry people in the future. Or the scene where his father was arrested by the Allies for trial. He couldn't help but question, "Isn't it no point why?" Prime Minister Heinlein looked at his confused son and couldn't help worrying about the future development of his family. It seems that his son is really not expected to be in politics, so it's better to retire this time. Looking at his son, who didn't quite understand, Prime Minister Heinlein explained it to reassure him. Actually, the advice I gave to His Majesty is my response to what is very likely to happen in the future. However, a bit of selfish advice is added to it, and that is to convict me and Archduke Friedrich. How selfish is this? I think you are asking for trouble. Seeing the righteous words refuting his son, Prime Minister Heinlein felt that it was a wise decision not to let his son enter politics. Of course I'm alone, and I'm truly convicted, but with the addition of Archduke Friedrich, I'm free from the dangers of future political turmoil. Seeing that his son still didn't understand, Prime Minister Heinlein asked directly, "How is Archduke Friedrich's reputation?" "Very good. I understand. Father, are you planning to tie up with Archduke Friedrich and take advantage of the public's sympathy for him in order to get rid of possible reckoning in the future?" "You finally understand." Then father, what do you do next? "Execute the emperor's arrangement." When Austria-Hungary was in turmoil, the Habsburg family sent Queen Zita, who was from the Princess of Parma, to condolence to the people, and also contacted the allied countries want to negotiate peace talks. It's just that now, facing the crumbling Austro-Hungarian Empire, I don't know whether the Entente countries want to talk to him, or whether they want to talk to these ethnic regions with a tendency to split. Only the Entente countries know this. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.